Number 10. Iron Man. I mean, Iron Man has come such a long way since that first classic appearance. He was basically just a guy in a big metal silver suit after all. Now he's a guy in, well, a big metal silver suit that isn't quite so bulky and actually has a few coats of paint on it. This is because when we first met Tony Stark as Iron Man, he was wearing his very first suit, in issue number 39 of Tales of Suspense. Here, we'd get his origin story, which would explain how Tony Stark was captured and made the suit under the guise of building weapons of war for his captors, when really he was building the suit to help keep him alive and also help him in his escape. This suit, of course, was built for a specific purpose, that of survival. But over the years, Tony would modify his design and improve upon it, even building various suits for specific events as might be needed depending on the circumstances. His most iconic look, though, often still involves him wearing his slightly more modern, though still classic colors of red and yellow. He went from silver to gold to red and yellow, I believe, although now he has more modern coloring in terms of the red and yellow colors. His armor appears a lot more metallic red and gold, which I love. Although I'm sure in the classic comics it was also supposed to be metallic red and gold, but we just have more advanced, I feel like, color tech in the future. Color tech. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here on Top 10 Nerd, and if you love hearing about some heroes that you might not be as familiar with or you might not recognize anymore, we also have a playlist where we show you some alternate versions, so go see some other characters that you might not know about now. Number 9. Green Arrow. Green Arrow literally looked like Robin Hood back in the day. Well, minus the now more Robin Hood style goatee that he now sports, because back then I feel like he was usually more clean shaven. Green Arrow is Oliver Queen. Technically his first appearance is no longer even the same Ollie that we have today in the comics, instead relegated to the alternate reality of Earth 2. But still, he was the original Green Arrow, and so if we are talking about classic looks in terms of first appearances, which is exactly what I'm trying to do here, Oliver has made a lot of progress in comparison to his first look and his first self. Currently, Oliver Queen in the Prime Earth main continuity of DC Comics has a much more modern look to him. Well, of course, like I said, minus that classic looking goatee and mustache combo, which is very Robin Hood to me. No longer does he wear a bright green suit with red boots and gloves. Instead, he wears body armor that, while still kinda green, is much more muted in tone. And sometimes he wears reddish bracers, which is kind of a throwback to the classic look, but even then, the colors are about where we draw the line when it comes to similarities to that classic look. Well, and obviously he still fights with a bow, because he is Green Arrow, but that I don't think will ever change. That would be weird if he was like, and now I'm Green Arrow, but I fight with a machete. I'd be like, that's really random, but alright. Unless it's a machete that he can shoot like an arrow. Number 8. Thor. Thor has always looked super classic when it comes to his Norse heritage, but now he looks even more cosmic, despite really having always been, as the Asgardians are not people from the past but are instead considered to be aliens of a kind, simply posing as gods on Midgard, aka Earth, where humans once prayed to Odin and the others. I'm sure some still do, seeing them as godlike figures. I mean, in essence, they are still considered gods, but they're also aliens, because they're, cosmic, but also divine. I would say that over the years, Thor's stories and overall appearance and costume have also greatly embraced his cosmic origins more and more. Thor also made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery issue number 83, where he also looked a mite smaller compared to his modern day self. I feel like that Thor is so the Thor we have now is oh, he's super deezed. And especially if we consider the Thor and Hulk crossover event Banner of War, Thor also hulks out here himself and even shattered the Bifrost again after becoming infected by Bruce Banner, so there he might look totally different because you'd be like, what? Thor's the Hulk? What's happening? Number 7. Crimson Avenger. I mean, most people might not even recognize the Crimson Avenger just because they don't know him. He's quite a classic hero, appearing on what I believe was DC's second superhero team ever, the Seven Soldiers of Victory, which made their first appearance back in the early 1940s in Leading Comics issue number 1. Here, Crimson Avenger was Lee Walter Travis. He appeared here sporting a super form-fitting red outfit with a fin on top and yellow underwear over top, as well as yellow boots to match. This look would seemingly endure until Travis met his end in DC Comics Presents issue number 38. Here, the question of what happened to him would be answered, and we learn after being diagnosed with an incurable disease, Lee decided to don his costume one more time and sacrifice himself to save others. Now, while this might sound like his original costume because it did sort of come into play super early on, his original costume, however, actually hails from even further back than the 1940s. The Crimson Avenger actually made his first appearance in the late 1930s in Detective Comics issue number 20. Here he sported a suit underneath a red cape with a matching red wide-brimmed hat and wielding dual pistols. He died back in the 80s looking very different in comparison to his first appearance, and I guess now you really wouldn't recognize him at all because I don't think we've seen a new Crimson Avenger since, with him remaining dead in regards to comic continuity. Tell me if I'm wrong on that one, but I can't think of a Prime Earth appearance that I've seen. Crimson Avenger? Is he in the Prime Earth? You tell me. Number 6. Robin. Jason Todd was once known as Robin. At the time, he was a hero, and while quite stubborn and brash, he did his best to live up to the mantle working alongside Batman. Eventually, however, Jason would end up leaving Wayne Manor and go on a search for his birth mother. During this time, Batman would once again find him just as Jason would find his birth mother. But unfortunately, the Joker would also find Batman and Jason, secretly blackmailing Jason's mother, and in the end, Jason and his mom would end up as the Joker's victims. Jason would seemingly not survive this incident despite Batman's rush to come to his aid. However, many years later, we learn with the re-emergence of Red Hood that Jason actually hadn't died here, but had managed to survive and return to life and later Gotham using his new identity, Red Hood. Gone are the days when Jason Todd acted as Batman's sidekick Robin, and in his place was Red Hood. At first a seeming villain, then an anti-hero who was unafraid to kill and fought with guns, and now currently a brutal vigilante who instead fights with a crowbar because symbolism. I actually really like Jason fighting with a crowbar, but I don't know, how do you guys feel about that? Number 5. Icarus. If we compare Icarus's first appearance to his latest appearance in the comics, you'll definitely see a pretty big transformation. If we're just going with that first appearance. Icarus makes his first appearance in issue number 1 of the Eternals, and while his golden locks may stay the same, his outfit has developed a lot more since what we see him in that first issue. We see him both disguised in civilian clothes and basically potentially wearing a little loincloth and booties, if he's the man flying across the panel that I'm thinking of. I'm pretty sure that's him. That guy also has golden locks and a similar look to Icarus, or at least the attire that he is wearing has a similar look. It's pretty limited though. Icarus in modern comics, whether we're talking about Kieran Gillen's latest and greatest Eternal series or the AXE Judgment Day event, wears a lot more clothes now. Although I will admit, on that first issue of Eternals, there is a little picture of him in his outfit, so sure, but I'm more talking about what happens in the issue. His civilian disguise, the sunglasses, the hat. More recently as well, his adaptation in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has him looking quite different additionally, where he was played by Richard Madden, showcasing him as a brunette instead of the more literal golden-locked golden boy. That iteration of the character also wore more blue and gold than his comic book counterpart, who lately is often draped in blue and red colors. That's more Icarus in the comics. I guess they had to get the gold in there somewhere, you know what I mean? Number 4. The Flash. The Flash is not even the same person as he was originally. He isn't even from the same Earth either. Initially, Jay Garrick was the Flash, appearing back in Flash Comics issue number 1. Later on, a new Flash would be introduced to us, and we learned that the original Flash, Jay Garrick, actually existed on another world, known as Earth 2. Barry Allen's Flash would first appear back in the 1950s in Showcase issue number 4, and would continue to be a recurring mainstay in the comics throughout his history, up until today, where Barry is still around even now, and for many people he's still the Flash. Today, however, the more prominent Flash, I would say, currently in comics, is Barry's nephew, Wally West. That's my Flash, but you know, I respect people that prefer Barry. Wally West as well is a completely different person and also happens to look totally different in terms of his outfit in comparison to the original Flash, Jay Garrick. All in all, the Flash has come a long way throughout the character's history, and while these are just the 3 main Flashes, the Flash family would also grow exponentially over time. So while they all might not be known as the Flash, there are also just tons of speedsters who are related to the Flashes running around. In fact, we should probably do a Flash family attempting to explain video, or a Speed Force attempting to explain video. That in and of itself, that concept, very interesting. Number 3. The Wasp. You might not recognize Janet Van Dyne anymore because I feel like, well, it's been a minute since we've actually seen her as a hero in the comics. Correct me if I am wrong, because I really want to be wrong on this, as you know, I haven't read everything, but I feel like Janet has been missing for quite a while in the comics, unless I'm wrong. Which is kind of surprising, considering she was originally one of the mainstays on the Avengers. I've seen her appear as a friend to Jen and She-Hulk in her civilian form when she lent Jen an apartment, and I know she was dating Iron Man kinda recently, but that's about all I can think of when it comes to Wasp. And I mean, she's not dating Iron Man now because he was with Hellcat, I think, last I checked. What is Iron Man's dating history? It's so strange. Fortunately, Jan is getting her own solo series. Well, she's gonna share it, but you know, the Wasp is getting their own solo series. Possibly the very first Wasp solo series ever as of 2023, which seems crazy to me. I hope I'm wrong on that one. This series will be shared with Nadia Van Dyne, who is also currently known as the Wasp in the comics. Janet first appeared in issue number 44 of Tales to Astonish alongside Ant-Man, and since then has had quite the evolution when it comes to her look, ditching the Ant-Man coordinated red for a bright yellow and black suit. Nadia also is technically a totally new character who took up the mantle, so totally different person. Despite her full name, she is the daughter of Hank Pym from his first marriage, who grew up imprisoned in Russia. After escaping and coming to America, she learned that her father was dead, but Janet still lived. Bonding with her stepmother, Nadia was inspired to take up her last name instead, which she did with Jan's blessing. Also becoming known as a hero, the Unstoppable Wasp. Which also obviously Janet was like, yeah, you can be the Wasp, I'm cool with it. Number 2. Green Lantern. Green Lantern, like the Flash, isn't even really the same person anymore if we are comparing modern day to classic. In fact, unlike the Flash in the main continuity event, Green Lantern has more than one modern counterpart. Who was the original Green Lantern? Well, that would be Alan Scott. Alan Scott made his first appearance in All-American Comics issue number 16, where he looked very different from our modern day Green Lanterns, and at the same time even kind of was a completely different Green Lantern in terms of, you know, where his powers came from and kinda how they worked, at least until later on when his powers origin was somewhat retconned. The modern day Green Lantern I'm sure most would think of is Hal Jordan, but there has also been Guy Gardner, John Stewart, Kyle Rayner, Jessica Cruz, and more recently Joe Moline, one of my favorite Green Lanterns, and that's just some of the mainstays of the Green Lanterns who hailed from Earth. There are a lot more as well. We've really expanded on Green Lanterns. So now when you say Green Lantern, I feel like instead of people being like, oh yeah, Alan Scott, or oh yeah, Hal Jordan even, people are like, which one are we talking about? Number 1. Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel was originally introduced to us in the comics as Carol Danvers in the late 60s. Carol herself worked with the US military as a member of the Air Force before becoming a security officer for NASA. It was there that she would meet her superheroic mentor and at one point her love interest, Mar-Vell. Eventually, Carol would get powers of her own in the 70s, debut as a superhero herself known as Miss Marvel. Based on that first appearance of the heroic character, we've come a long way in terms of her appearance and even who she is as a person. Carol isn't even Miss Marvel anymore, having gone on to take up the much passed around mantle of Captain Marvel in honor of the late Mar-Vell himself. Although as I said, it wouldn't just be Carol and Mar-Vell that would use the name Captain Marvel. With Miss Marvel available though, Carol ended up giving her blessing for Kamala Khan, Carol's #1 fan, to use the mantle as she started on her own heroic journey. In the comics, Kamala is known as an Inhuman with the power to basically modify her form and shapeshift to an extent.
In at number 10 is Franklin Richards. As the child of 2 members of Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, Franklin Richards came to us in comic books as a baby. So, of course he is going to change over time, but how drastically he has changed kinda surprised me. Given the nature of his reality warping abilities, Franklin has been shown to us as an adult before he had actually reached that age in the continuity. This happened a couple times. The first time he managed to age himself up to look like a blonde version of Jesus, which was hilarious and terrifying all at the same time. There was also a time he was abducted to the future and trained to become a powerful psionic hero calling himself Psylord, which is a stupid name. And yet another time was with Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four when future Franklin was traveling around time interacting with different members of his family, training his younger self, and making Galactus his little herald. The funny thing is that in all those appearances and versions of himself from child to adult, he has been blonde. Now again, his powers kinda mean that he can look whatever way he decides he wants to, but nowadays he's looking a hell of a lot more like his dad, Reed Richards, than he was before. In his teens, Franklin is sporting jet black hair, being super sulky like most teenagers are, and occasionally wearing an X-Men costume as his powers let him alter his own genes to give him an X gene since he believed that he was a mutant. It's a subtle change, but when I first saw him looking like this in the comics, I had no idea who I was actually looking at. He is also currently depowered as far as I know, which is a little upsetting, but also makes him no longer a mutant and just a depowered human mutate, so we shall see what happens there.
Number 9. Superman. Starting out with Superman for my first point here on this list, Superman made his first appearance in Action Comics issue number 1 back in 1938. He is one of the oldest characters around and one of the most prolific. Without Superman, the modern day superhero of today may not even exist. However, over the years, he's come a long way. He even managed against all odds to settle down, get married, and have a son. That is a rare thing in comics, where time often seems unmoving and endless. However, for Superman, almost nothing is impossible. The movement of life included, apparently. Ending up with his love, Lois Lane, the two had a son together named John. Even when the continuity they were from came to an end, Superman and his family survived, carrying on despite the fact that he wasn't really the New 52 Superman at that time. Eventually, the New 52 Superman, who was romantically tied to Wonder Woman, would die, and Superman from the New Earth would take his place. Although technically, Superman is now kind of a combination of both of those characters, which is kind of weird to think about because Superman and Wonder Woman were together, so what does that mean? Does he remember that? I don't know. Later, we'd get a glimpse into a possible future in Future State where Superman leaves Earth and his son John Kent takes up the mantle. Currently in the comics, John is Superman, with Clark having left Earth for a time, although don't worry, Clark Kent is also still Superman. When John was revealed to be bisexual, those who weren't following comics wrongfully assumed that DC had made Clark Kent queer, when in reality, the Superman that was revealed to be bi was actually John Kent. This made crazy headlines, but I was also like, I don't think these people quite know exactly which Superman they're talking about. But on my end of the spectrum, I'm like, yay, more bi babes! Always love to see that representation myself. Also, John is just such a great character, so I'm happy to see him get a little bit more time in the spotlight. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here on Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button.
In at number 8 is Star-Lord. When Peter Quill first appeared in Marvel Comics in Marvel Preview number 4 from January of 1976, he might as well have been a different character. The tagline on the front of the comic reads, "He stalks the galaxies, one man on a mission of cosmic vengeance." Now that's not really the Star-Lord we are familiar with today. There's also the fact that his look was reminiscent of Owlman from the Watchmen comics. Speaking of which, he actually had a pet owl. The comic, and by extension the character, was a lot more serious and fantastical. He also had actual superpowers bestowed by the costume he wore that was given to him by this guy called the Master of the Sun. He could fly without jet boots and in space without any protection. The main things that still remained were some parts of his origin story and the fact that he wielded an elemental weapon that could shoot fire, water, earth, and air, but only one. Now, you contrast this character with what most people have come to be accustomed to, and there are many glaring differences. Not even physical differences. He's a hugely different character, which was probably also influenced by a bit of Chris Pratt's humor. But even in his first appearance with the Guardians of the Galaxy, he's starkly different to his Marvel Preview days.
Number 7. Elongated Man. Elongated Man is a character whose design has been pretty consistent since his first appearance in The Flash issue 112, even now in the comics. But there was a time when his appearance was totally different, and you may have not recognized him there. This happened after Ralph Dibny and Sue Dibny, his wife, died, and then they became ghosts for a bit. But not just ghosts, ghost detectives. Admittedly, as ghosts, Sue and Ralph do look like themselves, but just as civilians in a spectral form. So even though Ralph does look like Ralph, you still might have not recognized him or Sue during their ghostly appearance, because they were ghosts. It was a cool and short-lived time, and I like to talk about it because I love the idea of ghost detectives. I wish we got more of that. To check out Sue and Ralph in their ghostly forms, you can refer to issue number 52 of the 52 comic series.
In at number 6 is Blue Beetle. I will be honest, Blue Beetle kind of flew under my radar for a very long time. I either simply didn't care about him, or I just hadn't really known he existed. I don't know which one it was, but it was definitely one of those, and seeing the costume that the original Blue Beetle wore kinda makes me think that maybe it was the first option. That costume absolutely sucked. It was bland as hell, and it was basically just Dan Garrett in some leggings and an oversized shirt, a stupid looking cowl looking thing, and a bad domino mask. It was during World War II, so we're gonna blame this on material shortages, but every Blue Beetle outfit has been an improvement and redesign of this costume. But now, with Jaime Reyes, the Blue Beetle armor is not just way more advanced and capable, but it looks leagues and bounds better than the original. So much so that it's hard to even draw comparisons between the two. Now, if we put these suits up side by side and change the colors of one of them, almost no one would believe that one was an evolution of the other. So much better now, thank the Lord.
Number 5. Wonder Girl. Wonder Girl is great, and we don't honestly honestly talk about her enough. But I guess what I should really say in regards to this list is the Wonder Girls are great. While initially the first Wonder Girl appeared as a younger version of Diana Prince in Wonder Woman issue 105 in 1959, I think the more common Wonder Girl we all think of when the moniker is mentioned, or at least most of us think of, I definitely think of, is Donna Troy. Donna Troy made her first appearance in The Brave and the Bold issue number 60 in 1965, and her look has come a long way since then. But also, she's not the only Wonder Girl anymore. There's also now Cassie Sandspark, and the more recent addition from the Brazilian Amazon, Yara Flor, with each of these Wonder Girls possessing their own very unique look.
And number 4 is Daredevil. Since some of you guys hated that Amanda used superhero names that were taken up by another character for part 1, I'm gonna be a massive troll and do it again. Know why I don't care? Because the costume that Elektra dons when she assumes the Daredevil name is freaking awesome. I absolutely love this costume. It is different enough from any of Matt Murdock's costumes to make you look twice or 3 times, but retains elements that make it clear that this is still Daredevil. That point is actually a combo because Elektra has also never looked like this before either, so wham bam, there you go. Now, her time as Daredevil was honestly somewhat short, but in my eyes, it was kind of iconic. So much so that I believe her time with the costume did transfer over some elements to the most recent iteration of Matt's costume. Now he's got that sweet neck scarf hood thing going on with the more athletic looking pants. It's much more of a ninja inspired look, and I personally will take it over his classic look any day. Sorry, not sorry.
Number 3, General Tynamon. Going back to the Super Ninja Steel season where the Rangers were involved with the whole Galaxy Warriors thing, Tynamon was the manager of one of the most famous fighters, Brax, but was hiding a small secret. It turns out that Tynamon was in fact a small creature who, embarrassed by his small stature, had constructed a robot body to make himself look bigger. Oh, Tynamon, tiny man, I get it, cute. So Tynamon was approached by the villainous Madame Odious, who offered to grow Tynamon to the size he desired if he and Brax would help her destroy the Rangers. He agreed and began a campaign against the heroes. His main weapon is his staff, which can create a protective barrier and can fire a rope line to ensnare and move his enemies. In his final battle with the Rangers, he is hit by the Gigantify Ray, letting him finally achieve his dream of being huge. This was short-lived, however, and he was defeated by the Ninja Steel Ultrazord Blast and died, never really having gotten the opportunity to enjoy his new size. Number 2, King Aradon. Our next villain was actually mentioned in passing by Zordon in Power Rangers Zeo all the way back in 1996, but we didn't get to actually meet this king until just last year in the Mighty Morphin comic book series. After Earth was weakened by the Altarian War and Earth's command center was destroyed, the ruler of the Automaton Dominion, King Aradon, decided to take advantage of the situation and sent scouts to the command center's ruins where they tried to ambush the Red Ranger. He decided that Earth was ripe for the taking and declared himself ruler with the aid of his general, Count Karnakas. He offered to spare the Green Ranger's life if he stepped aside and allowed the king to destroy Zordon. When the Ranger refused, the two entered a heated battle, which was aided by Red Ranger Rocky, who helped the Rangers triumph over the evil king. Number 1, Leisure. This villain appeared in an episode of the Dino Supercharge season and is vaguely summer themed. There is so much going on visually with this character. She has an ice cream cone for an arm and a lobster claw coming out of a sun hat for the other. She has fish pants and palm trees for eyes. The longer I look at this villain, the more I feel like I'm having a stroke. 100,000 years ago, Leisure used her vacation ray on the cavemen, which made them all want to take a break from their work and go on vacation. This got so bad that everyone almost starved as no one was hunting, but she was imprisoned in a cave and the effects of her beam were reversed, and as a result, we got hustle culture. She was accidentally released by the Rangers and despite looking so odd, turned out to be extremely powerful, beating the 7 Rangers with ease before firing her vacation beam on the entire planet, making everyone, including the Rangers, just stop what they were doing to go on vacation. They eventually attacked Leisure with the Plesio Charge Megazord, but she used her ice cream arm triple scoop twist attack to defend herself. She was eventually defeated, and everyone got back to work. Yay!
Number 10, The Builders. The Builders are a recent addition of the Marvel Rogues Gallery, only recently approaching their 10th year of existence in the comics, which makes them sound old, but really relative to comic book history, they're still pretty new, because Marvel Comics I think has been going on for like 80 years. Whoa. The Builders are a race of beings who claim to have created most of the known worlds in the universe, seeding worlds and influencing the development of civilizations for eons. They are also said to be a perfect race of beings, and when the multiverse appears to be dying as a result of incursions, they take it upon themselves to clean up the mess by wiping out complete worlds and empires, which puts them at odds with the heroes of Earth during the Infinity crossover event.
Number 9. The Black Winter. Ready to be slightly confused? Good. So the Marvel multiverse rebirths itself whenever it gets destroyed. Right now the multiverse is currently in its 8th version. Everything prior to the most recent Secret Wars and the incursions and the battle world and all that took place in the 7th version. Before that came to be, there was, get this, the 6th version. And when that version was destroyed, only one being survived. That would be the character who became Galactus. Well, now we know how the 6th cosmos was destroyed, and ooh, it's scary. The 6th cosmos was actually consumed by an entity called the Black Winter, essentially a living storm of destruction and entropy on a multiversal scale, like Galactus but for universes. Kind of. When the Black Winter ate the 6th cosmos, it allowed Galen, Galactus' real name, to live on into the 7th cosmos, and serve as its herald. Now, funnily enough, Galactus mostly ignored his heralding duties until the day the Black Winter showed up in the 7th cosmos in 2019. Galactus turned to Thor for help, but the two were unable to cooperate, and Thor wound up slaying Galactus, something the Black Winter prophesied would actually happen. Then Thor turned the corpse of Galactus into a power cosmic explosion and blew up the Black Winter. But before it went away, it showed Thor how he will perish at the hands of Thanos wielding an Infinity Stone encrusted Mjolnir. So now we have that to look forward to.
Number 8. Mr. Misery. Mr. Misery is a Doctor Strange villain that was actually created by Doctor Strange himself. Some people create their own villains. Oof. Some people are their own villains. Ah. Mr. Misery was a creature that embodied all the pain and misery that Strange had suffered from using magic during his time as Sorcerer Supreme. The beast was also commonly referred to as the Thing in the Cellar. At least, well, that's what it was originally referred to as. We'll get to that in a second. The Thing in the Cellar was released when all magic was threatened during the attack of the technological army known as Empirical. Mr. Misery is actually the name the creature took for itself after Doctor Strange was forced to reckon with it following its accidental release. Strange freed the creature by depositing his suffering and pain instead into the people that he had saved, dividing it up so that each only carried a small piece of it within them. These people were also willing to do so as they had been saved by Strange in the past. So they were like, yo, Strange is my guy, I'll take a little bit of pain for you, no problem. Even after being freed, Mr. Misery continued to crave the pain and suffering of others, which is, you know, why he took the name Mr. Misery and became a villain. Or they, it. It's kind of like a blob.
Number 7. Horticulture. Ever since I learned about this group, I will take any opportunity to talk about them. Horticulture is a group of 4 older women between the ages of 64 to 81 who are all expert botanists. They are Augusta Brones, Lily Lamus, Edith Scutch, and Opal Vedivere. And their goal is simple. Sort of. Essentially, they want to bring Earth back to a more pristine time. A time when it had about 7 billion less people on it. Yes, these ladies want to basically exterminate most of the Earth's human population and bring plants back to the forefront, and specifically flowers, which is kind of a lovely idea, sort of. This goal brings them into conflict with the X-Men in 2019's X-Men number 3, because the nation of Krakoa, that the mutants call home, have been mass producing these flowers with different bio and tech purposes, and these ladies would like to use them for their villainous goals. Beyond biological modifications believed to have been made to themselves, the women of horticulture are experts at manipulating the environment to suit their extinction agenda. And they're also computer programmers, selling software to the anti-mutant group Orcus to monitor Krakoan gateways. So, now you know.
Number 6. Cordyceps Jones. Although he might not be as new as some of the other villains mentioned here, Cordyceps Jones is still a relatively new villain, if you've been out of comics for the last few years at least. He first appeared back in 2017 in Rocket issue number 4 and was created by Al Ewing and Adam Gorham. Cordyceps Jones is known for having a salacious reputation across the cosmos. He's a 30,000-year-old fungal parasite who, due to his longevity, has made an intergalactic fortune and is known for owning many successful casinos across the cosmos. Recently, he appeared in the X-Men series, where he seems to be threatening the existence of Earth, setting up a bet for fun to see who can be the first to wipe it out. Because, you know, that's what you do when you're a rich fungal parasite and you've been around for too long. That's what happens. You're like, gotta make some bets. Number 5. Rhino. Rhino was given a completely new look for his appearance in the second Amazing Spider-Man film. Honestly, Rhino is a hard villain to do in live action, I feel like, so I'm not surprised with the direction that they went with, but also, what a weird direction to go in for that character, considering what they're actually supposed to be like in the comics. In the comics, Rhino is Alexei Sistovich, who is genetically altered and then bonded to a suit of armor that increases his strength and durability. Basically, he's given like a mechanical rhino skin, but like the skin. The armor was modeled after a rhinoceros, as they are known in nature for being relentless when it comes to their assault and extremely hard to defeat due to their tough hide. Rhino, however, has never been known for being very smart, which makes him fairly easy to defeat usually, which seems to be the same idea when it came to his cinematic counterpart. However, the whole design for this character was definitely different than the comic book counterpart, whose armor was much less mech-like or robotic and is more like just the tough hide of a rhino. Really, he kind of just looks like a guy in a rhino suit in the comics. Also, Alexei is just super jacked in the comics, and his cinematic counterpart didn't seem so jacked. He was just like a guy in a suit. Of course, Alexei does get a lot of his jackedness as well from his whole rhino thing, but he also, I think, was jacked still to begin with, I'm pretty sure. He's just more jacked. Number 4, Legion. Legion has a new look in X-Men Onslaught Revelation. This one-shot is kind of like the bookend for the Way of X limited series if you were checking that out, which I personally haven't read all of, but I will say the parts of it that I have read have been strictly excellent, so I would recommend Way of X to anyone that's interested. If you like the idea of pondering the why in life and beliefs, and you enjoy philosophical prose, this is really a great series for you. In Onslaught Revelation, Nightcrawler, Legion, Pixie, and Dust come together to try and defeat the resurrected Onslaught, who has been slowly returning with each resurrection, residing as pieces in the minds of all mutants. In order to help in the fight against Onslaught, Legion makes his mind a safe space for all mutants to come through, in essence also fully connecting with Krakoa and kind of becoming a sort of hive mind if necessary. As such, he gets a redesign, though he still gets to keep the wild shape of his hair that we've all come to recognize so well, and that I've really come to love. Legion, moving forward after the defeat of Onslaught, will also keep this look as he becomes the newly created religion's church. That's right, Legion is the church. He's the building. In essence, people can come into his mind to worship, find community, and seek sanctuary. It's like a nice safe space for people to come and just like be and feel good. It's awesome. I love that Legion is the church. I just think that's great. Number 3, Donald Blake. Donald Blake ended up becoming a villain recently in the comics, which is a pretty big change for a guy who was once also the mighty hero Thor. Donald Blake used to be Thor's human form, but in reality was kind of his own person, or he kind of ended up becoming his own person. He was created by Odin to be a human host for Thor, but after Thor died at the hands of the serpent, Blake became separated from Thor and became his own separate entity. Eventually, he would end up going to the Enchantress for help, only for her to use him to make her own villainous creature referred to as the Keep. Basically, she killed Donald Blake and then used his blood to make the Keep, and we haven't seen the Keep in a while, but I'm sure he's out there somewhere. After Amora and the Keep were defeated by Thor, Blake was laid to rest, living on as a disembodied head in a dream world that was crafted for him. Well, living on as a person in the dream world, but he was just a disembodied head. But he was asleep, so he was dreaming. Eventually, though, Blake came to realize that this world wasn't real, and awoke from his dream, seeking revenge on all Thors across the multiverse for what had happened to him. And don't worry, he wasn't just a head then, he had a body then. He would end up being defeated by 616 Thor in the end, and then made into the God of Lies, as per Thor's brother Loki's suggestion. Thor was like, what do we do with this guy? We shouldn't kill this guy. He's Donald Blake. Loki's like, nah, let's make him the God of Lies. Seems to fit considering everything Donald Blake has been through. Number 2, Taskmaster. Taskmaster is Anthony Masters and is known for being an unstoppable foe. He can master pretty much any skill he can observe. Some would say he's a taskmaster, which makes him a deadly opponent. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we were also introduced to Taskmaster, but the character was changed somewhat for the film in which they were introduced, Black Widow. Instead, Antonia Dreykov, the daughter of General Dreykov, the man behind the Red Room, was Taskmaster. When Black Widow left the Red Room and became an Avenger, she believed she had killed Dreykov, sadly also having to kill his daughter, who basically led them to their target. She was a casualty of the explosion, intended to kill Dreykov himself. Instead, Antonia was actually badly injured and ended up surviving, but her face was permanently scarred. She then became Dreykov's weapon, having studied the moves of the Avengers and having their fighting styles basically uploaded into her brain, allowing her to mimic all their various moves and making her a hard opponent for Black Widow to defeat. Quite different from the comic book version, but still really cool and badass as an alternate version of the character, I think. Number 1. Cyber. Cyber has come a long way when it comes to his look in the comics. Granted, Cyber has also come back a lot of times, so I guess it kinda makes sense that he would look different. He made his first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents in issue 85 in the 90s, where he was introduced to us as a cyborg-appearing Wolverine villain who was hired by General Koi, another enemy of Logan's. Back then, he was just a smile and a coat with a hat on. Currently, however, his design is much different, and he doesn't even go by the name Cyber anymore, instead being known as Hornet in the comics in his newest body.
So we're all familiar with Trapster, right? Peter Petruski, the incredibly intelligent chemist who fights with pretty much a high-powered glue gun, as well as other adhesives. Well, there's a mysterious woman taking on his moniker. Not much is known about this new Trapster, but she's actually the third person to take on this name. Cool thing about her is that she ditched the E in Trapster because who needs the E? It's 2022. It just looks cooler. This version of Trapster first appeared rudely interrupting a fight between Spider-Man and Vulture, and she robbed the winged villain of money he had just stolen. This may have seemed like a good thing, but she didn't give the money back. She's now a member of the all-female crime syndicate, the Sinister Syndicate, having been recruited by Beetle.
Number 9. Sin Eater. Sin Eater is Stanley Carter. While his costume may have remained somewhat the same, actually pretty much the same, his appearance more recently in the comics drastically changed after he was resurrected by Kindred, who were actually revealed to be the twins. The twins being Sarah and Gabriel Stacy, who in turn were revealed to be clones created from the genetic materials of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. So, not their naturally born offspring. Yay. Then, Sin Eater died, then was resurrected again. The second time Stanley was brought back after he'd taken his own life, he appeared in a zombie-like state, making him almost unrecognizable from his usual appearance, barring the fact that his costume has remained pretty much the same since his first appearance. Although, after rising from the grave the second time, his costume is pretty tattered, so I really think some people might have been like, who dis?
So, as we stated before, there is a new channel we have out now called Most Amazing Top 10 Anime, so if you're into that sort of thing, give us a follow and subscribe. We're putting out videos every day. This next master of the hunt is the ruthless son of Sergei Kravenov, simply known as Kraven the Hunter, the last son of Kraven. Sergei Kravenov, the original Kraven, wanted to carry on his legacy, so instead of having more children, because that would just take too long, plus he already has a daughter, he decided to create a whole lot of clones of himself, 87 to be exact, and attempted to train them in the ways of the hunt. Well, this current Kraven got his title by murdering all his brothers, which, hey, if you want to prove you're the apex predator, killing 87 clones of Kraven the Hunter is a great way to start your career, isn't it? He also saved the skulls and brought them before his proud dad. The son made his dad even more proud when he strangled his father to death while he was disguised as Spider-Man, thereby breaking his curse of immortality. The son has now taken on his father's moniker, Kraven the Hunter, as well as his actual name. Good job, buddy.
Number 7. Kane Parker. Kane Parker was initially a clone of Spider-Man who, yes, was considered to be, kinda evil. Chiefly because Kane didn't have any qualms with killing people, leaving them with his mark of Kane, which typically was used to kinda burn the face of his victims. And also because he had long hair and was more moody than Spider-Man, which is a feat because Spider-Man's a pretty moody dude. In reality, the mark of Kane was actually just Kane using his spider climbing little hooks on his hand, as we saw showcased visually in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, to burn his victims' faces. Cain was also seen as evil because he was mentally unstable, having been a defective clone who was rapidly deteriorating, which basically affected his mind. However, Cain is now known as Scarlet Spider and has a completely different look and attitude when compared to his original appearance and presentation in the comics. While still being, somewhat edgy because he's still Cain, he's definitely still more of a hero now in the comics than he ever was before.
The original Super Adaptoid, created by Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, was originally a villain facing off against Captain America, Iron Man, and of course the Avengers, also going up against the X-Men. It was able to mimic and visually copy anything it wanted, giving it a hero's abilities and powers. But in Amazing Spider-Man 900, however, Spidey faces off against a different version of this shape-shifting entity known as the Sinister Six Adaptoid. This version of the character sports a brand new look, most prominently featuring Doc Ock's tentacles, but there are other visual elements in the character's design as well. The Sinister Six Adaptoid is an amalgamation of sorts of, you guessed it, the Sinister Six, having the abilities of Doc Ock, Vulture, Kraven, Mysterio, Sandman, and Electro. The Sinister Six had been captured by the Living Brain, and their powers and sentience combined to form the villain. So if you thought these guys were strong on their own, imagine going up against all of them at once. Spider-Man actually needed help the real Sinister Six in order to take this abomination down. Go figure. Also, I love when villains team up with the hero just to because they both hate the same person. It's just fun.
Number 5. Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4. Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that version of Onslaught has the black suit and now the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3. One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we later learned that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2. Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways, whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1, the leader. I doubt after all this time if the leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the one below all, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns. Number 10, Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9, Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tynalt the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tynalt so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tynalt, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veronki, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Nell, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veronki? What? Not Veronki, two different people. Number 8, Kraven the Hunter. You might think you recognize Kraven, but do you really? After all, the current Kraven that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than Kraven's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of Kraven was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravenov, the Kraven himself. As such, this clone of Kraven was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of Kraven the Hunter. So while he may look like Kraven, albeit a younger version of him, this Kraven the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of Kraven made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son. Number 7. Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6. Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, you might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot, and more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently.
Number 5. The Sinister Adaptoid. Okay, so the Super Adaptoid ain't no kind of new villain either, but an Adaptoid that takes on the abilities and likeness of all the members of the Sinister Six, that's certainly something new. In Amazing Spider-Man number 6 from 2022, which also happens to mark Amazing Spider-Man number 900 in legacy numbering, a second and improved version of the Living Brain emerges as the story's primary antagonist on Peter Parker's birthday. His main goal? Trying to find out who Spider-Man is. To that end, he kidnapped all of Spider-Man's most frequently deadly foes, the Sinister Six, and created a super adaptoid with them. It's like 25 feet tall, strong, fast, zappy, honor-obsessed, eight-legged, mysterious, and it likes to quote some of the Six's lines. Spider-Man ends up having to team up with the captured Six villains to fight the Adaptoid, but it's actually the villains' inability to properly work together that makes the Adaptoid malfunction and destroy itself. It's kinda funny how that works. As for the Living Brain, he ends up switching sides when Spider-Man refuses to let the Six destroy it, and saves the day before revealing it actually already knows Peter's real name. Kinda weird.
Number 4. Orchis. Orchis is the entire villainous organization that first appeared in House of X issue number 1, back when Dawn of X was just starting up and it was all fresh and new and we were like, a new mutant thing and it's so good, and now we're like, please don't ever end, but it's probably gonna end soon, so I'll just go into the closet and cry forever. Don't worry about it. Orchis is an anti-mutant organization that is pro-human, and as such is all about the advancement of AI, such as Nimrod and Sentinels, to help protect humanity against the growing mutant threat. Like there's gonna be some people in the comments who are gonna say, Actually, Nimrod is technically a Sentinel, and you're right, but also, don't worry about it. Orcus sees mutant evolution as a threat to humanity's existence, but little do they know, the AI they're creating is likely to serve as an even greater threat to humanity's existence in the future, based on everything that we've seen and every alternate universe we've ever explored where that has continued. Many have joined Orcus since we were first introduced to them, with even a few mutants betraying their own kind to join their ranks. Number 3. Grey Goblin. Gabriel Stacy has been known by a few different names throughout the years, and has also had his backstory somewhat altered. Initially, we knew Gabe Stacy as Grey Goblin, and later as American Son in Age of Heroes. Originally, he was introduced to us as the son of Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy, who basically had a secret love affair which resulted in the birth of 2 twin babies, Sarah and Gabriel. However, when Gabriel and Sarah were revealed to be the mysterious demonic villain returning from hell, known as Kindred, we learned that they were actually never really the natural born children of Norman and Gwen, thank goodness, but instead were clones that Harry Osborn had made, using their genetic material to get back at his father, tormenting him and making him think the 2 were really his children, when actually they weren't. It was all Harry's plot, ha ha ha. Not only did Gabriel have a completely different look as Kindred, but he also got a completely different backstory that explained away all the weirdness of his and Sarah's original origins. Which, I mean, thank you for that, because wow, that was bad. It's not good. I don't want Norman to sleep with Gwen. I'm not here for that.
This next baseball player turned villain is known as Frederick Myers, aka Boomerang, and he's gone through several changes, having worked under criminal organizations like the Sinister Syndicate, as an assassin, going up against a number of heroes, and of course, Spider-Man. So how did this boomerang-wielding baddie change? Well, he ended up aiding Black Widow, Maria Hill, and the Champions in their fight against Hydra, and cut a deal to get a full pardon for all his past crimes. That's pretty sweet. He later became Peter Parker's roommate in an attempt to get closer to Spider-Man as he was attempting to find the pieces of the Lifetime tablet. Though Boomerang was lying about his true motives to Spidey, saying he was only after the tablet to keep it away from Kingpin, this was quite the opposite actually, he was working for Kingpin. Despite his deception, however, Frederick actually formed a close bond with the hero and would go on to sacrifice his own life to save him during a fight with the vampiric villain Morlun.
Number 1. Green Goblin. Norman Osborn is often known as the villain the Green Goblin, one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, if not the most iconic rogue he happens to have in his gallery. Their rivalry is an old one, going all the way back to the first appearance of the character in the 1960s, where Osborn actually first appeared not in his civilian form, but simply as the villain Green Goblin. But lately, Norman has had a change of heart, if you can believe that. It most certainly won't last forever, or at least I'd be very surprised if it did, but currently in the comics, Norman is actually one of the good guys for a change. This is after he had all of his sins purified by the villain known as Sin Eater. Initially, Peter as Spider-Man had saved Norman from Sin Eater, but after being taunted about Gwen, couldn't help but toss Green Goblin to the villain to be devoured, which, I mean, fair enough. But instead of perishing, Norman survived the encounter, no longer driven by madness, guilt, or rage. Having been purified, he was seemingly given a new lease on life, and currently remains one of the few villains purified by Sin Eater to stay that way. At least.
Number 10. Phone Pan Z. During the Ninja Steel season of the show that ran in 2017 and 2018, the Rangers were forced into a gladiatorial-style intergalactic tournament called Galaxy Warriors. They faced many competitors who were trying to kill them and steal the Ninja Power Stars. Oh, that sounds important. One who actually came pretty close to besting the team was the contestant named Phone Pan Z. As is implied by the name, he is a hybrid of a chimpanzee and a phone. Although he is a capable hand-to-hand combatant and can unleash basher bots upon his enemies, his real strengths come from the deception skills that his phone parts grant him. Not only can he use the speaker in his mouth to unleash a massive sonic boom that would send his enemies flying, but he could mimic voices with uncanny accuracy. This allowed him to imitate a ranger and then call up one of their teammates, who he would then draw into a trap and attack. The host of the Galaxy Warriors, Cosmo Royale, then used a Gigantify machine to turn Phone Pan Z giant, forcing the Rangers to use their Zords to form the Ninja Steel Megazord and the Bull Rider Megazord. They defeated the giant monster, who promptly exploded. Okay, that's weird, but I think I'm following this okay so far. As long as the villains don't get any stranger than that, I should be fine. Number 9. Typeface. Oh come on, that's a keyboard! After the Ninja Steel season, fans of the Power Rangers were given the Super Ninja Steel season. Like Phone Panzer, Typeface is a contestant in the Galaxy Warriors. He could summon basher bolts and was an expert fighter, being able to hold his own against multiple Rangers at once, which is really impressive because he doesn't look like he'd be super mobile. He can fire lasers out of his hands and spacebar, which were powerful enough to incapacitate all 6 of the Rangers. And he is also a teleporter, but his real strength is more tech-based, which, yeah, I should hope so, otherwise the theming is kinda weird. He has a virus gun, which can infect the weapons of the Rangers, making them unable to effectively fight his with their Element Star Ninja Fire attack. The Rangers were eventually able to repair their weapons and attack Typeface, and Cosmo Royale repeated his strategy of growing Typeface into a giant monster who had to be defeated by a Megazord. However, this was a difficult task due to him being able to use his teleportation abilities to dodge several attacks and gain the upper hand for a while. However, the Rangers were eventually able to take him out with the Ninja Blaze Megazord's Ranger Blast final attack. Yeah, you gotta watch out for those. Number 8. Pandemonium. In the Mighty Morphin comic series, the new Green Ranger destroyed the Green Chaos Crystal, which left the infamous Lord Zed incapacitated. As he recovered in the Moon Palace, Zed's cronies discussed their options about what their next course of action should be. They considered eliminating their boss, but decided against it as it would require them to grow spines, and instead decided to try and capture the Green Ranger so that when Lord Zed awoke, he would have someone to vent his frustrations on other than them. They created a creature called Pandemonium, who was of course a panda who had super strength, as well as an entire arsenal of spears and axes sticking out of his back, which he could remove and use against the team. He could also give off massive energy blasts, which damaged anyone caught in his vicinity. The panda gave the team some trouble, but was defeated when the new Green Ranger showed up and used his dragon dagger to destroy the creature. Zed's cronies watched from afar and bemoaned that they had chosen too cute and cuddly of an animal to be their agent of destruction. Number 7. Horrid King. In the Power Rangers comic series, the Rangers and Zordon are not on good terms, as the Rangers have taken off in a ship searching for a means of defeating the Imperials in deep space with the evil Lord Drakon serving as their guide. Things soon start going south when their ship stops working and they discover that they have been boarded by a frightening race of alien energy-draining vampires known as the Horrid, and their king. The Horrid were once a peaceful race of people, but their planet was destroyed when they attempted to control reality, trapping them in between dimensions, neither alive or dead. They learned that they could absorb other beings' life forces in order to take on a physical form. The Horrid King led them across the galaxy looking for beings that they could absorb before coming across the Rangers. The king and all of his people cannot be harmed by physical attacks when in a non-physical form, as all weapons simply pass through them. However, if they have fed enough to take on a physical form, they become vulnerable. This weakness was exploited by Drakon, who killed the Horrid King and took his place as the Horrid's leader. Number 6. Vargoyle. Vargoyle, the robotic villain, was one of the early inventions of Skrozzle, but when they discovered something called the Fury Cells, Vargoyle used them to become powerful beyond measure, but also evil. Skrozzle escaped and Vargoyle followed, but eventually agreed to work for Evox in exchange for the Beast Powers upgrade. He was sent after the Rangers, where he feigned being weaker than he was to lull them into a false sense of security before unleashing his full might when they least expected it. He manages to install a memory rewriting machine in a local TV transmitting tower to wipe everyone's memories of his boss's previous attacks. This was undone, and he was destroyed by Devon's Beast X cannon. He was revived by the villain Ryjack, who wanted to form an alliance with Evox. This revived Vargoyle had an upgraded golden body, but was also fitted with a compliance collar, which he of course was not thrilled about. His teleportation and weapon summoning powers are handy, and his beast powers give him a real edge between his cheetah speed and gorilla strength, but it was not long before this evil robot was taken out again, never to be rebuilt.
At number 5 is the Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn. As if this villain wasn't enough of a contender for Spidey to deal with before, he actually takes on the Carnage symbiote, turning him into the Red Goblin, as mentioned before. This makes him nearly unstoppable, forcing the good guys to employ anti-venom on him in order to take him out for good. And even though he has since gone back to being the Green Goblin, the character takes another turn that makes him unrecognizable from his past self during the events of Kindred Rising. And by unrecognizable, I mean that he's now working with Spider-Man. When Sin Eater cleanses Norman of his sins, his allegiances change and he becomes a hero. At number 4 we have Dr. Doom. These days, Dr. Doom has taken on some pretty unstoppable powers that some would even describe as being godlike. Big fans of Victor Von Doom might have expected him to reach a point like this at some point because of his insatiable hunger for power, but as of 2022, he's already surpassed at least my expectations of what he was capable of. Although they haven't stuck around until the time that we're posting this, he has taken the powers of the Silver Surfer and even the Beyonder, giving him a whole new mantle of God Emperor Doom during the Secret Wars storyline. Just for scale, this gave Dr. Doom the ability to piece together broken pieces of the universe after the multiversal collapse. And that's a pretty crazy glow up if you ask me. And even if he doesn't hold quite that much power these days, having had that ability has changed the character forever, if you ask me. At number 3 is Darkseid. Originally introduced as a nearly unstoppable supervillain and one of the most powerful in the whole DC universe, Darkseid's powers have been dumbed down quite a bit since then. Although he appears the same, his immense power level just isn't the same these days as it always was. For example, his eye beams were originally meant to kill his targets in one hit, but these days, they don't by any means take out their targets in one hit. He used to be almost unbeatable, but it seems like heroes are making easier work of him than ever as of late. This is probably a result of him appearing more often in the comics, because if he'd kept his same unstoppable status, his appearances would have to be regulated, or else our heroes would be out of commission in the blink of an eye. At number 2 is Anti-Monitor. Another case of a villain getting nerfed. Anti-Monitor's gotten it bad these days. If you thought Darkseid got taken down a notch, just think how much room there would be to do the same with Anti-Monitor, because he is, after all, the most powerful being in the DC multiverse. Just to get an idea of what I mean, back in the day, Anti-Monitor takes out multiple universes alone before he reaches ours, and then once he does, it takes a hell of a lot to take him down. In fact, it became one of the most notable moments in all of the DC comics when they did, because it was so difficult. But when he returns from his defeat and joins the Sinestro Corps, he just seems to be in a totally different echelon of power, a lesser one, to the point where the Justice League can take him out on their own these days, which is just weird to see for fans who knew his power level back in the day. At number 1 is the Batman Who Laughs. Enough with the downgrades, because this guy's change is a glow up if I've ever seen one. These days, the Batman Who Laughs has gained so much power that he's known to be basically godlike, and he finds these new powers in the place that he comes from, the Dark Multiverse. After finding a Dr. Manhattan powered Batman in the Dark Multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs gets his mind transferred into the body of that hero, acquiring the greater part of Dr. Manhattan's abilities, but with the sinister touch of his usual self as well. The only way that he's able to be taken down is when Wonder Woman finds a way to match his power level herself and defeats him despite his insane power boost.
Number 10, Harley Quinn. While Harley Quinn's character design and costume has been changed, it's pretty similar to a lot of looks we've seen her in the past. Mostly what we're seeing in her new series is a change to art style, and with her new role as Batman's ally and sidekick, a complete shift over to the side of being a hero. Harley is of course still bringing her unique approach to heroism, so don't panic if you are a fan of Harley's wackiness and standout personality. But considering where she came from, being Joker's sidekick, this is a pretty big change to her character as we originally knew her. If you've been out of the comics for some time and aren't quite as well versed in Harley Quinn's history, you might not recognize her in 2021, as she's gone from full villain to full hero. Number 9, Poison Ivy. Over the last few years, Ivy has gotten a few pretty drastic redesigns, so if you are reading her in 2021 from anywhere along her recent history in the past 3 to 5 years, you might be a little confused when it comes to her look and ask yourself, wait a minute, is that Ivy? Also, who's Queen Ivy? We've seen her go from eco-villain to hero and environmental activist and spokesperson to dead to alive, and split down the middle between those two warring personas, the villain and the hero. when we literally got 2 Ivies. Then from there she became Queen Ivy and got a complete redesign when it came to her costume. Now she's back to wreaking havoc on Gotham, or is she? Time will tell what alignment we'll see for Ivy in the future. But either way, I'm here for the ride. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want to learn about more cool redesigns and updates to characters that we've seen recently, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Especially in the Batverse, I feel like there's so many Bat characters that have been introduced and redesigned. It's awesome. Number 7. Black Mask. Black Mask not only has a new look and redesign, in future state that is, that I must admit is spectacular, but he also got a power upgrade during the Year of the Villain event. Black Mask was given the ability to change his identity with the added upgrade of an identity changing mask, which is pretty powerful. Also, his suits have gotten admittedly a lot more stylish over the past few years. So for those who remember his classic look, Roman Sionis may have the same mask, but the rest of his look also seems to have received an upgrade. Number 6. The Freezes. That's right, not only does Freeze get a new redesign, but he also gets a huge change in the fact that he was joined by his family, becoming a little supervillain fam jam unit all their own. 2 separate units really. In the main continuity, Mr. Freeze was given a serum by Luthor that allowed him to make his long-lasting wish come true. He was able to revive, cure, and become reunited with his frozen love Nora, who also ended up joining him in a life of crime. Yay! However, while it all started out sweet, their reunion would quickly turn sour when Nora became resentful of Victor for making so many choices for her, and in her eyes, trying to control her. Victor blamed the serum for her change of heart, but I mean, who really knows? I feel like Nora's kinda got a bit of a point, even though I feel really bad for Victor in this scenario. In Batman issue 96, we are treated to an alternate Victor Freeze who commits crimes alongside his sons as a little criminal family unit. Super cute.
Number 5. Killer Croc. We got our first look at Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc, in Detective Comics number 524. In this version, he had a medical condition that gave his skin a rough, scaly appearance, earning him the nickname Killer Croc. In his first appearance, Croc is actually pretty cunning, being able to rise almost to the top of the Gotham underworld. His physical appearance is also pretty tame, being gray and scaly but still clearly a human being. As he made subsequent appearances, not only did he get dumber, but his look became more and more exaggerated until he eventually looked like an actual crocodile, with green scales, sharp teeth, and sometimes even a tail. His size in the original comics is large, but still within believable human proportions, whereas at this point, he is so tall that it's hard to imagine any skin condition resulting in a villain like Croc. Number 4. The Green Goblin. Arguably Spider-Man's greatest foe is the Green Goblin. First appearing all the way back in Amazing Spider-Man number 14, the Green Goblin had a pretty consistent look for most of his career, sporting a purple and green costume with a horrifying grinning goblin mask with a purple hat. He flies around on a bat-shaped glider and throws exploding pumpkins at Spidey. Over the years, Norman Osborn has had a few different aliases and therefore costumes, such as the Iron Patriot and the Goblin King, but it's usually not long before he's back in the green duds. More recently though, he's trying to be a hero and is wearing a white and gold bodysuit and going by the name Gold Goblin. The glider kinda gives it away, but based purely on the costume, would you think this is the same guy? If that's not different enough for you, just take a look at the Green Goblin in the Ultimate Universe, where he is more like a Hulk than the classic villain. Number 3. Victor Freeze. This classic Batman villain was very different in his first appearance in Batman Volume 1, number 121. He was a scientist who suffered an accident that forced him to wear a specialized cryosuit that kept his body temperature below freezing. He soon began committing crimes not as Mr. Freeze, but as Mr. Zero. His original look was a green and pink bodysuit with a bubble-shaped helmet feeding him cold air. When the character was adapted for the 60s television show, he was renamed Mr. Freeze, and this name eventually was brought over into the comics. His look began to evolve closer to how we now know him, but he remained a rather C-list villain until the 90s animated series revamped his origin to be a tragic figure trying to find a cure for his sick wife. This interpretation was so popular that it was also brought into the comics. The character is now very different from his original appearances, but it is interesting to see how much he has changed over the years due to his adaptations in other media. Number 2. Catwoman. I know, there are a lot of Batman villains on this list, but that is mostly because they tend to be a much more consistent group of villains than a lot of other heroes have, and also because they're the best comic book rogues gallery by a country mile. First appearing all the way back in Batman #1 in 1940, Catwoman was very similar to her modern personality, being a brazen and flirtatious cat burglar. In this first story, however, she doesn't dress as a cat, but instead uses various disguises to steal a jeweled necklace from a boat and is simply known as the Cat. In her next appearance in Batman #2, she is still not wearing a full-on costume, but is referred to as Catwoman for the first time. When she shows up again in Batman #3, she finally gets a costume consisting of a long flowing yellow dress, a red cape, and a literal cat head mask. In Batman #35, her costume evolves more into something that we today would recognize as Catwoman, with a purple dress, green cape, and less intense cat mask. The look stayed the same after that for a few decades until the comics took some inspiration from her look in the 60s TV show, and she ended up in the skin-tight catsuit that has evolved into the look we all know and love today. Number 1. Thunderbolt Ross. For most of his history, since Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross first appeared in Incredible Hulk #1, he has remained pretty much the same. He's an angry mustachioed general obsessed with capturing or killing the Hulk. He stayed this way for decades, being a constant antagonist in the Hulk stories, but the status quo changed in 2008 when he joined the group of villains known as the Intelligentsia, who helped transform Ross into the Red Hulk. Since then, Red Hulk has been both villain and hero, but if you saw the original Ross next to the Red Hulk, you would have no reason to suspect that they are one and the same. Number 10. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn was created in the classic 90s Batman animated series where she was the Joker's main henchwench and girlfriend. She proved so popular that she was brought into the main comic book continuity, where she was dressed pretty much the same as she was in the animated show, with a red and black jester costume. Over the years, both her look and personality have evolved as she has broken away from the Joker and become her own person, who is a bit more of an anti-hero at this point. Although her color scheme has remained the same, she now has a bit more of a wild look, wearing a red and black corset and leather jacket, letting her blonde hair with dyed pigtails flow free. It is a major difference, but there are other characters who have changed even more, which is why Harley is at the bottom of this list. Number 9. Paste Pot Pete. Originally, Pete used a glue gun to commit robberies while dressed in this rather strange green jumpsuit and purple beret. Paste Pot Pete is really Peter Petruski, a scientist who developed an advanced adhesive that made him very wealthy. However, he believed that a life of crime would be even more lucrative and began robbing banks and stealing missiles. He updated his costume a couple times, going for a more purple pouchy theme, and ended up changing his name to the Trapster after Spider-Man burst into hysterical laughter upon hearing the name Paste Pot Pete. He made some minor updates to his look in the following years, but eventually settled on a yellow and brown outfit that he still wears in his most recent appearance. None of his looks are particularly menacing, but if I saw his first look side by side with his second look and was told that one was called Paste Pot Pete and the other the Trapster, I would have no reason to think that they were the same villain, other than both using a similar weapon. But at the same time, so do Captain Cold and Mr. Freeze. Number 8. Hawkeye. In his first appearance in Tales of Suspense number 57, Clint Barton was a carnival worker who performed incredible trick shots with arrows. When the audience was unimpressed with his performance and booed him off stage, he became jealous when he saw Iron Man show up to save the day when one of the rides went haywire, much to the crowd's delight. He thinks to himself, "I'm the greatest marksman the world has ever known, and yet they ignore me." He decides that if he makes himself a few trick arrows, he will be just as respected as Iron Man, because a guy in a purple tunic and mask shooting arrows is just as impressive as a flying weaponized robot suit. He becomes a supervillain, going toe-to-toe with Iron Man. In the years since his first appearance, Hawkeye has gone from supervillain to superhero and has had multiple identities and costumes, but in his most recent appearances, he has traded his more flashy masked look for what is essentially just a black t-shirt with a purple arrow on it and some sunglasses. Without the context of the many years of stories between his first and most recent appearances, not only would you be confused as to his very different look, you'd also be surprised at how a supervillain is now one of the most frequent members of the Avengers. Number 7. The Riddler. Since his first appearance in Detective Comics number 140, the Riddler's gimmick has remained pretty much the same. He is hyper-intelligent and uses elaborate traps, puzzles, and of course riddles to prove that he is smarter than the Batman. His look has remained pretty consistent across media, with him wearing a green spandex bodysuit covered in question marks for much of his career. Other times, when he's feeling dapper, he wears a green suit and bowler hat. This has been his look in almost every comic, and when he was first adapted for live action in the 1960s television show, Frank Gorshin's costume felt ripped right from the pages of the comics, with him alternating between the spandex and green suit looks. When Jim Carrey took over the role for Batman Forever, it was very much the same. Even when the character showed up in Gotham, he was pretty faithful to the character's original look. However, when Matt Reeves decided to take a more grounded approach to the character in the recent The Batman movie, he had Paul Dano's Riddler in an unrecognizable style. Gone were the spandex, and in its place was a green raincoat and a winter combat mask. You know, it's funny, when I watched this movie with my parents, they hadn't seen any of the marketing, and when Riddler showed up in the opening moments of the film, it wasn't until they saw his first riddle that they realized who he was. It's a bold new look for a bold new take on the character, but if Riddler shows up in a sequel, I wouldn't mind if he went just a touch more classic with his look now that he's an established villain. I mean, there's nothing really that heightened about a guy wearing a green suit jacket. Number 6. Metallo. John Corbin was a very minor Superman villain who first appeared in Action Comics number 252 in 1959. In this story, he was a regular man who was in a car accident before being transformed by a scientist into a robot covered with foam latex which looked like flesh. He was given a kryptonite-powered heart, and he soon clashed with the Man of Steel. In his first appearance, he's just a guy with a pencil mustache wearing a suit, and there's nothing really notable about him. In fact, he dies in his first appearance. Once the New Earth continuity began, a revamped version of the character was introduced with probably his most iconic look. He was still a regular looking guy, but usually his skin would soon get torn off, and he would be seen as a menacing metal skeleton, not unlike the Terminator. In more recent appearances, he's in a more bulky mech suit with glowing green components. He is quite an underrated villain, but if you saw the current version or the skeleton version next to the original guy in a suit version, you'd have no reason to suspect all three were the same character.
Number 5. Man-Bat. While so many supervillains are getting power upgrades, additional allies, and more horrifying redesigns, Man-Bat is going the other way with it. Man-Bat is Kirk Langstrom, who ends up joining the Justice League Dark and gets a much more adorable character redesign as a result. He looks a lot less monstrous and a lot more humanoid and cute. Kinda geeky. It's great. He even wears a bow tie. This is likely a redesign meant to symbolize Man-Bat having tackled some of his personal demons and his move more towards a heroic role as opposed to a completely tortured soul and uncontrollable monster. Number 5. Scarecrow. Scarecrow already looked pretty terrifying in the comics, but now he looks intimidating as well. Very intimidating. Not just maniacal and crazed. We got a fresh look at the Scarecrow redesign in previews for Infinite Frontier, and then in all his glory in the actual comic itself in issue 0. Here, Scarecrow appears to wear a gas mask with straw or sticks coming out of his head, almost like a crown. He is armed with long fingernails or claws at the end of his gloves, evoking a sort of Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street feel, especially as these claws seem to be directly connected to vials of fear toxin, which have tubes connecting to Scarecrow's headpiece? That's what it looks like to me. I think the idea is possibly that Crane is producing the fear toxin himself from his own mind and sending it down to these vials to be dispersed whenever he manages to scratch an enemy with one of his needle-pointed claws. All in all, it's a pretty intense look that might leave you asking who this character is, but kind of in a good way, as I consider this redesign to be an upgrade to the villain. Number 4. Catwoman. Catwoman in Batman Earth 1 has come in with a wild new look that will leave you floored. I mean, you will admittedly still recognize her, just not as the Catwoman that you're used to seeing. This version of Catwoman, instead of wearing her typical black or dark purple catsuit, looks a lot more noticeable and bold by comparison in terms of her design, especially for a thief. Here we see Catwoman donning a purple crop top and hot pants with striped thigh-high socks. She still sports a purple color motif at least though, so that helps with the recognition. Also, she has a paw print belt buckle and a cat mask, a literal cat mask, and she's got a cat on her shirt. Still, this look and redesign for the character is definitely very different. Very unique, I would say. Number 3. Bane. Really, Bane's daughter goes by the alias of Vengeance, but she definitely looks and seems to be following in her supposed father's footsteps. Bane's daughter was first introduced in the new Joker series in issue number 2, and is revealed to be the daughter of the supervillain who went through a series of experiments to give her super strength like her dad. Her mission is to get revenge for his death, and she's doing so by hunting down the Joker, who she and many others believe was responsible for the events and many deaths of A-Day. Her father, who was in Arkham Asylum at the time, was one of the victims of that attack and died. So Bane Jr., aka Vengeance, is out for blood. Number 2. Clayface. You really won't recognize Clayface in the new Batman Earth 1 volume. Clayface is not very recognizable here in terms of the story, as he is disguised for most of his appearance and in terms of his character design. Near the end of the story, we learn that Adrian Arkham, Bruce's grandfather, who returned from the dead, was in actuality Clayface in disguise. We're all used to seeing more of a giant mud monster when it comes to how Clayface is depicted, but instead, here we get a very kind of, I don't know, smooth looking baldy figure in the end, who appears to really kind of just be a man. Like a man who can shapeshift, but just a guy. Like a guy who, if you saw him on the streets, you wouldn't run in terror from him or anything. You might just notice his skin was like a little odd looking in terms of its texture, but that's about it. Other than that, he looks pretty average. Number 1. Two-Face. The Earth 1 version of Two-Face sees the character completely reinvented in a way you might not have expected, which is what makes it so great. On Earth 1, Harvey and his sister Jessica are working together to clean up Gotham alongside their good friend Bruce Wayne. After Harvey ends up dead, however, Jessica and Bruce are forced to continue their mission to eradicate corruption and crime in Gotham without Harvey, working on in his honor. But Harvey lives on in more than just their intentions. It turns out that Jessica develops a dissociative personality disorder, in essence becoming her brother due to the trauma of his loss. At least that's what it seems like if we had to explain it on paper. Although never explicitly called Two-Face, the duality of this version exists in the goodness of Jessica and the contrasting ruthless aggression of Harvey. Honestly, the story is so good, you really need to check out the new Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, because even knowing where this story goes, even though I just told you that part, it's still an amazingly compelling read, so go read it, even though you kinda know spoilers now.
At number 10 is Despero. Although Despero has always been totally jacked, he was originally known as more of a threat to the Justice League through mind manipulation. During the Silver Age, he would only typically use his telepathic powers before anything else, but these days, it's a different story. Although these changes did start to take place way back in the 80s, the character has come a long way since the days when he would sit on his throne and twiddle his fingers most of the time. Now, he seems to do a lot of the grunt work himself, even looking larger in size these days than ever before. And even outside of the comics, Despero's appearance in the Arrowverse offers a totally different look into the villain. He takes on a human form for much of the time, who is, well, let's just say he's not as big as Despero, nor does he have much musculature to him, no offense to that actor. Nor does he have a third eye or anything that a comic book fan would expect, and when he's in proper form, he just seems a lot less demonic and cunning, more like Hellboy's very serious detective older brother or something like that. At number 9 we have Anton Arcane. The penultimate villain to Swamp Thing, Anton Arcane has always been a threat as one of the most prolific evil scientists in all of DC. But when Swamp Thing finally kills Anton during one of their many confrontations, back in 2016 I think, the villain goes to hell and basically becomes a demon. Having been a pretty tame foe for most of the Swamp Thing comics, Anton Arcane's physical changes have made him almost unrecognizable now that he's a demon. And what's worse is that he continues to bother Swamp Thing and his niece Abigail, but now with the added demonic powers in mind. So he's changed quite a bit, both in looks and power set. At number 8 we have Psycho Pirate. The way that this villain has changed since the Infinite Crisis event is unmatched. Although he looks relatively the same, he's gained such a power boost that he now works with the likes of Darkseid and Alexander Luthor. After surviving the crisis, he comes out on top, getting his hands on what's known as the Medusa Mask. And what this helps him do is basically summon beings from the old multiverse, which, as you can imagine, is a very powerful ability, especially directly following the event itself. And even though he's been killed by Black Adam during the events of Blackest Night, Psycho Pirate's corpse is brought back to life as a Black Lantern. And as you can imagine, this gives him a whole new look and increases his power level. He loses the Medusa Mask in this ghoulish form, but even without it, he appears totally different than how we're used to seeing him. At number 7, we have Doomsday. The primary change with Doomsday isn't something that's been gained, but something that's been lost. A very notable power of his, actually, and that is his hyper adaptability ability. In fact, I would even argue that this was his main power, and what it meant was he could learn from past losses in battle and change his physiology to prevent himself from being killed in the same way twice. I don't know why this has been dropped, because aside from it being the defining characteristic of Doomsday, it was just a really fun ability to watch, because it made every encounter with the villain a new challenge for the heroes, which would ultimately make for an exciting read. But for whatever reason, this power has basically been left in the dust, making Doomsday that much less unique from any other Bruiser type villain, at least in my opinion. At number 6, we have Dr. Octopus. Something that the less avid readers may not know about this villain is that he's been going back and forth between heroism and villainy for some time now. And not only that, Otto Octavius has recently taken on the mantle of Spider-Man, donning the superior Spider-Man armor outfitted with the mechanical arms and everything. He's also been taken over by Venom recently, as well as the Carnage symbiote. Although he's known to be back to his evil ways and his classic suit in 2022, there is no telling if he'll jump back into the Spidey suit once more. He's already gone back and forth a number of times, even in the last few years, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did it again.
Number 5, Snag Eye. This robotic general was created to serve the Void Queen during the second season of Dino Fury. He pledged his eternal loyalty to his queen, who demanded that he destroy the Rangers. He was given data on the Dino Fury Rangers' powers, which allowed him to easily defeat the 6 Rangers. The chessboard buckle on his torso contains a pocket dimension, which he was able to use to imprison his foes. It was only through the betrayal of the Void Knight that the Rangers were able to escape the pocket dimension. He then went up against the Red Ranger, who managed to destroy this robot bishop general using the Dino Knight strike. So, though he was only in one episode, the fact that he was able to absolutely wipe the floor with the Rangers is pretty impressive. Number 4, Wreckmate. Yet another Dino Fury villain. Wreckmate has a lot of themes going on at once. He is a robot who looks like a rook from a chess set, but he's also a pirate as well as a general. He's just a lot. He's a lot. He was built from the parts of a boat, but became a giant when the Void Knight gave him a Sporix. The Dino Fury Rangers fought him underwater in their Dino Fury Megazord warrior formation, but Wreckmate proved too powerful and was able to defeat the Megazord. Before he could destroy it, he was interrupted by the Moza Razor Zord and presumed dead. He entered a competition with his rival teammate Slither to see who could kill the most Rangers, with the loser having to leave forever, though both were of course unsuccessful and unable to score a point. He served the Void Queen soon after, often clashing with and failing to defeat the Rangers. He has shoulder-mounted cannons which can fire cannonballs, energy blasts, lasers, and torpedoes. As a pirate ship-themed robot chess piece, he was of course capable of surviving underwater like a submarine, making him just as dangerous on land as he was on water.
Number 3, Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but 1, he looks completely different, 2, he wasn't doing anything until now, and 3, he's cool, so I don't really care. Uranos the Undying is Thanos' grand uncle, and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the Deviants and the humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into civil war. Now, he ultimately lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranos for help in Axe Judgment Day #1. And to show how powerful he is, in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other very powerful mutants. He's scary.
Number 2, Annihilation. Annihilation was at first a mysterious villain who appeared in the X-Books. Eventually, however, we learned that Annihilation was actually a demonic and possessive force which had taken over Genesis, who was forced to take up the golden helm of Annihilation after defeating the villain. It was basically a losing battle either way, as if Genesis lost, she would have died, but in winning, she was forced to take up the helm and then lead the demonic forces of Amenth, which had so long plagued Arakko and its people. So it's like a if you win, you lose, and if you lose, you lose. Genesis turned out as well to be the long-lost wife of Apocalypse. Apocalypse had left his wife, children, and people eons ago in an attempt to help saving Arakko from the Amenthi forces that threatened to one day overtake it. In the end, Apocalypse, with the assistance of Saturnine, helped to free Genesis from the hold of Annihilation, and the helm was turned into a staff that was less influential on its host and more easily used as a tool instead of, possessing the will of whomever possessed it. Annihilation had their first appearance in X-Men issue number 12 from 2020.
Number 1. Monolith. This likely villain is so new it was hard to even find information about her. First appearing in July of 2022, which is last month unless you're in the future, in Hulk number 9, Monolith is the very strong, big pink queen of Hulk Planet. Hulk Planet is set to be the title of the new Hulk story arc taking place after Hulk's whole Titan Hulk thing and the fight with Thor that just took place. The planet itself is situated right next to a gamma-emitting star, so if you haven't guessed yet, Hulk Planet is indeed a planet covered in Hulks. Banner, piloting the Starship Hulk, finds the Hulk planet while on a mission for isolation. Instead, he meets Monolith, who offers him a place among the other Gamma beings where Hulk can exist in peace. But of course, there seems to be more to Monolith than meets the eye, and we kind of just have to wait until we can find out more information. It is likely safe to assume that as the leader of a planet of Gamma mutates, Monolith is very strong and very powerful. Will Hulk find peace? That's not usually how it goes, but only time will tell.
Number 10, Super Skrull. Kl'rt might be recognizable when it comes to his character design, which admittedly has not changed that much over the years, but when it comes to his alignment, you might be somewhat surprised to learn where he is now, from where he started. Super Skrull Kl'rt made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 18. Once again, the Skrulls attempted to invade Earth and planned on defeating the FF, this time with their secret weapon, the Super Skrull, who seemed to possess all of the Fantastic Four's powers. Unfortunately, Mr. Fantastic and the team realized that these powers were likely not Super Skrull's own, and suspected in fact that they were delivered to him from the Skrull homeworld. They used a device to jam the signal that was giving Kl'rt his powers, defeating him. Currently in the comics, Kl'rt serves Emperor Hulkling, and was for a time one of his trusted advisors. Kl'rt, however, was also the one who killed Hulkling's foster mother. Recently in Empire Aftermath, Kl'rt felt so awful about his past that he actually offered his life to the Emperor. Hulkling refused to accept it though, instead preferring to make Kl'rt work in the area of diplomacy so that he might make amends for all the lives that he had taken in times of war. He was like, no. Instead, you gotta save lives, and hopefully that'll make up for it. You can't just die on me, Kl'rt. Number 9. Hell's Bells. Hell's Bells was a group of villains who were all female mutants. The team was originally assembled by Cyber, who trained all of its members and consisted of Shrew, Briquette, Flame, Tremolo, and Vague. When Shrew betrayed them by testifying against them in order to get immunity for herself, the Hell's Bells banded together in an attempt to get revenge on her for betraying them. Eventually, they would be successfully taken into custody by X-Factor. Following the events of M-Day and Decimation, all team members save Briquette found themselves completely depowered. They still have operated as criminals in the comics, appearing in the Children of Atom series most recently, but they were a lot less scary because they had to rely on equipment and gadgets in place of, their own powers. Even without their powers, the team mainly stuck together though, minus Briquette and obviously Shrew. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more lists about Marvel villains you might not recognize or something in that realm, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Silver Samurai. While Silver Samurai looks much the same in the comics as he always has, not every iteration of him has been so recognizable. We've seen him turn up here and there on Krakoa recently. He seems to enjoy watching and participating in the friendly single combat matches in the Quarry, and in modern comics, he's recognizable. But how about in modern film? Well, Silver Samurai might not be a main character in Fox's mutant universe, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He actually made an appearance in the 2013 film The Wolverine. But although here he also seemingly looked the same, when it came to his armor at least, he couldn't be further from his comic book counterpart in actuality. That's because Silver Samurai here was an adamantium robot whom Wolverine had to battle against. Yeah, they made Keniyukio Harada robot armor. He was at least piloted by Ikiro Yoshida, who was obviously that film's version of Ken's own father in the comics. So, at least there was a little bit of a thing, but still, he wasn't even a person. He was just robot armor. Like, rude. Ken is a whole person, okay? It's not just armor. Number 7, Forearm. Forearm is Michael McCain. Originally, Michael was part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front. He was one of the founding members, but would end up defeated by those that fought against him. Despite generally being on the side of the villains, Forearm was also welcomed onto the mutant island nation of Krakoa, where he could have a fresh start for himself. He accepted the offer and would end up joining Sword and being seen as a member of Magic's Dark Riders, who I think should get their own book. However, on Krakoa, he looks a bit different from his initial appearance, where he decidedly was showing a lot more forearm and had much less shirt. Forearm's mutant power is that he has 4 arms. Get it? Get it? His 4 arms. And now he wears shirts. Good for you, Forearm. Good for you. Although you can also not wear a shirt. You can not wear a shirt if you don't want to wear a shirt. Like, I'm not going to pressure anyone to wear shirts if they don't want to, or vice versa. I'm not going to pressure anyone to like not wear a shirt if they're like, I like my shirt, let me keep my shirt. But I do like his new design as well. His new outfit is pretty cool. Number 6, Thanos. Thanos might look very similar to his initial appearance in the comics, and also looks quite similar on the big screen, but he's seen a pretty big change when it comes to what he's up to recently. In the comics, that is. In the MCU, he's mainly dead and gone, but there is a chance perhaps that he could return. Who knows? Not only have we now met Star Fox or Eros in the MCU, but in the comics, Thanos has become the new Prime Eternal, and as such, their new leader. That's right, this guy just went from being the baddest supervillain around to leader of a superhero team. Although we'll have to see where the Eternals' alignment is in the comics following the events of Avengers vs. X-Men vs. Eternals War, because that's probably gonna be crazy. Also, I don't even know what the Eternals is really doing in that mix, but I'm here for it. I'm here to check that out. Number 5, Electro. The main Electro we've known for years is Maxwell Dillon, but there is a new Electro on the scene. This new Electro is Francine Fry. She was once the accomplice and love interest of Max, who died as a result of her love for him, and her obsession with villains and kinda her lust for them. While Max's powers were less in his control, Francine threw caution to the wind and decided to kiss him. Their kiss would result in her being electrified to death. However, she'd later be revived by Ben Reilly, operating as villain the Jackal, as part of a plot to help control Electro into basically doing his bidding. Turns out the DNA Reilly used to resurrect Francine in clone form was actually a mix of Maxwell's and her own as a result of that kiss, allowing her to harness and absorb electricity, chiefly the power of the suit that a depowered Max had at the time been given. Kissing Max once more, Francine absorbed the suit's powers, accidentally killing him in the process and becoming the new Electro. Max has since been resurrected, so now even more confusing, we have 2 Electros technically running around.
Up next, we're taking a look at Richard Fisk, now known as the Rose. The son of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, Richard would boast about how rich and powerful his father was, thinking he was just a highly successful businessman. Now, even if that was the case, like, come on, don't go around boasting about your parents' accomplishments. Live your own life. Well, that's exactly what Richard decided to do. Upon discovering his father was actually the kingpin of crime, Richard faked his own death and took on the moniker of the Schemer, attempting to take down his father's empire. The two would eventually reconcile after Richard felt bad about putting his dad into a coma. Fair enough. But this brings us to Richard's next moniker, the Rose. He now sported a purple mask and kept a rose in his front pocket and worked under his father, but secretly wanted to dismantle the Kingpin's organization from within. After killing a policeman in a shootout, however, Rose just realized he was a bad dude and aligned himself with his father again, but then changed his mind and wanted to take over Kingpin's organization again. Just kill your dad or don't, man. It's a decision we all have to make at some point in our lives.
Number 3, Robin. On my part 1 for this list, I talked about Jason Todd's Robin, but many of the characters that we originally knew as Robin have changed over the years when it comes to their appearance. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about how all the Robins are technically different people, which could be confusing to people that have read different eras of different comics. We won't do that again, although I already did it with Superman, so you might be coming for me anyways. But for this point on this list, we're going to be talking about one of the most classic Robins, Dick Grayson. I would say actually the most classic Robin. Dick Grayson was the first Robin, and not only has his look changed, his whole identity and main location has as well. Dick Grayson would eventually grow up to become a hero in his own right, Nightwing. While trained by Batman and definitely seeing Bruce as someone he looked up to, Dick ultimately branched out on his own, even going on to form the Teen Titans. Later, just the Titans, because you know, they're no longer teenagers, and leading the team all on his own as well, which is pretty impressive. As Nightwing, Dick currently tends to operate more often in Bloodhaven, a city outside of, but I believe a short distance away from Gotham, with its own crime and corruption to deal with, that in some ways makes it seem even more bleak than Gotham.
And at number 2 is Bucky Barnes. This is probably one of the biggest and most drastic changes of most comic book characters. I think the only thing that stays the same is the domino mask. Even the man underneath the mask has changed. When Bucky Barnes first came into Marvel Comics in 1940, he was the young sidekick to Captain America with his star-spangled belt, blue shorts over top of his bread right skin-tight pants, and the stylish bright blue jacket with the yellow collar. A classic look not reminiscent of Robin at all. At least, he wasn't showing as much skin as Robin did sometimes. His outfit was at least somewhat more believable than Robin's, given he was operating in World War II. But that was then. If you showed someone who'd only ever read the old stories a picture of what Bucky Barnes looks like now, they would have no idea what had happened. I mean, we got long, edgy hair, a whole lot more muscle, a pretty much all black and gray tactical look, sometimes with a face mask to cover his mouth and nose, with a hell of a lot of firepower, and oh yeah, his whole left arm is now a metal cybernetic replacement. It's a huge difference, but it goes with everything the character has been through, which is a lot. He's a much more sympathetic character, but also such a complete badass.
And finally, number 1, Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly was originally known as a hero in the comics. He is the clone of Spider-Man, who also acted as a hero and at one point was mistaken as being the real Peter Parker. For a while, we weren't sure who was the real Peter Parker. For a time, Ben Reilly was a main character we'd also follow along with in the comics. He would also go on to take up his own superhero identity, becoming the Scarlet Spider, before Kane took that name, that is. Since the old days though, Ben has become more dark and complex, even becoming known as the villain Jackal. More recently, he's become Spider-Man, but once again has fallen into the tempting pit of villainy, after literally falling into a pit of green ooze. And his look, while definitely Spider-Man inspired, is much different now, with him being known by the villainous mantle of Chasm. This name comes from the memories of Peter's that Ben lost, as well as some of his own unique memories which were also lost, which sit like a great chasm in his mind, hence the name Chasm.
At number 10, we have Dreamer, or Dream Girl, who doesn't quite resemble the way she used to appear in the original comics. That's because in the CW series Supergirl, Neuronal is now Nia Nal, and aside from her costume making a decent change, the character is actually quite different as well. Most notably, Dreamer is known to be the first transgender superhero to appear on TV, played by Nicole Maines, who is herself a transgender activist. But that's not all. The character is also quite a bit younger, and I mean, her hair is isn't even blonde anymore, which I think is fair to note. She doesn't look quite the same. But either way, from the name change to the costume change to even an entire color palette shift, Dream Girl, now Dreamer, has metamorphosized into someone completely different. At number 9, we have Elongated Man. Not the most widely popular superhero to begin with, Elongated Man takes a rough turn in the Arrowverse when his costume is entirely reimagined in The Flash in one of the worst ways possible. Although he's sort of played off as a joke character in both the comics and the Flash series, it's still sad to see such an unimaginative portrayal of any hero, really. Although Ralph Dibny is mostly out of costume, he becomes known to be the worst dressed within the narrative of the show as well, throwing more oil on the fire of Elongated Man's memeability. But even aside from the costume, the character just appears much less boisterous than he typically does, with a younger disposition and somehow a down-to-earth vibe, even though he's Elongated Man. At least in the way that he appears serious while he's in costume, a total departure from the goofy, exaggerated image associated with Elongated Man in the comics. At number 8, we have Swamp Thing. This newer version of the character from Infinite Frontier is just insane. With the new host Levi Kamei, Swamp Thing takes a whole new turn in how he's presented. Well, not entirely. To be fair, Swamp Thing has always kind of been this big, nasty green monster, but something about this modern depiction of how the green takes over Levi's body turns what used to look like a big green beast into a massive green spaghetti monster, it looks like. An extremely terrifying spaghetti monster, to be exact. Although the character doesn't appear for long in the short-lived series, this is the most recent update we have on the Swamp Thing, and he's surely taken on a different vibe than he used to. At number 7 is Connor Kent. Con-El is one of the many people to take on the mantle of Superboy, and it seems like his look has changed more than your average hero. He's also known to be a clone of another more real son of Superman, which I suppose leads him to run into some identity issues, which could be part of it. But he most often appears to look like this high school bad boy with the spiked leather jacket look, but he's also got the black and red supersuit, and at times has also presented a lot like the classic Superman with the blue, red, and yellow costume as well. But that's kind of my point. It's hard to know whether you're looking at Con-El or John Kent, or even another Superboy from an alternate dimension, because he doesn't seem to have decided on one look, and he's pretty hard to recognize, especially these days as his time goes by. At number 6, we have Wonder Woman. Now, a couple newer comics make this hero a bit different than what we're used to. During a one-shot in 2020 called Future State, the Wonder Woman mantle is taken on by Yara Flor, who takes the place of Princess Diana while she's away for a time. Sporting a totally new costume with a handful of different weapons, this iteration of the hero just gives us a totally new look at who Wonder Woman could be. More recently, near the end of 2021, a younger iteration of Yara Flor appears in the Infinite Frontier series as Wonder Girl, offering the new status quo of what the DC universe might look like moving forward. But aside from the Wonder Woman mantle being taken on by a new character, there is another series that leads right up until the end of 2021 called Wonder Woman Black and Gold, in which multiple different art styles are employed to give us a totally new aesthetic to the Wonder Woman story itself. Although there is a continuation of the traditional Wonder Woman storyline running into 2022, there are also some alternatives to the character that have been released right up until this year that give us a whole new look into how the character could be portrayed. And at number 5, we have Gambit. Back in 1990, when the character was introduced, he didn't strike me as much of a pretty boy as he seems to be portrayed today. But now, his charm has become actual part of his power set known as Hypnotic Charm. Now, with this new storyline being dropped later this month, I can't confirm what I don't know about the official 2022 version of the character, but in recent years, Gambit has changed quite a bit, at least in certain portrayals. Partly with his newer Hypnotic Charm power, but also with his abilities he acquired during his time as the Horseman of Death for Apocalypse. During this time, he gains a set of newer, darker abilities that usually aim to kill, and even further, after blinding himself with an exploding card, Gambit learns how to see the future somehow, which is a big deal for a character that has always otherwise just been concerned strictly with kinetic energy and things of the like. And although these days he has renounced the title of Horseman of Death, he still might have the ability to disintegrate his targets through molecular acceleration. In his new self-titled series, however, we'll see him paired up with a child version of Storm, which will tell the story of how Gambit came to be an X-Man. So maybe maybe the character will get back to something closer to his original portrayal, whether we want that or not, but we'll see. At number 4 is Iceman, another character that is being endowed with a whole new range to his power set. Iceman these days appears to have the ability to conjure up ice beasts on command and freeze his targets on a molecular level. Some argue that the level that Bobby Drake has brought his powers to at this point has given him status as an Omega mutant, which is a far cry from the days he was riding ice slides and throwing snowballs. Still having these ice slide abilities at his disposal, Iceman seems to favor his god level powers these days, and for good reason. I just didn't expect the young Robert Drake from the old X-Men cartoons to have come so far as to be able to create living beings from scratch, but crazier things have happened in the last few years. At number 3 we have Magneto, who seems to have reached a new level of power these days, with his magnetokinesis now being applied to the whole electromagnetic spectrum. He gains a whole new set of abilities. As of late, Magneto has been showing off his gravity-defying powers, radiation absorption, and even light manipulation, allowing him to turn himself and others invisible. So yeah, if you didn't think that having total control over all the metals in the universe was enough, Magneto is now these days able to control light. So there's that. I mean, to an extent. At one point he even makes Dazzler punch herself in the face with her own light-based powers, which is pretty OP if you ask me, but it's still the old Magneto we've always known somewhere in there. He looks roughly the same. He's just developed quite a bit since the old days, and we're excited to see where he goes from this year onward. At number 2 we have Jubilee. Jubilee has always typically been known as a bit of a pushover, having a pretty passive power set under her belt. She was able to shoot fireworks on command, and that was sort of it. She was always a fun person and was great at distracting enemies, but in terms of sheer power, she wasn't gonna land high on a list if she was ranked among her peers. But in the last couple of years, this character has undergone a total transformation, and what turns out to be known as lumikinetic explosive light blasting is a power that could be tapped more than just creating small bursts of fireworks on command. These days, Jubilee is able to create literal explosions, sometimes even considered to be nuclear level. Not only this, but over the last couple of years she has also spent a good stint as a vampire, which just makes the character even more different from what we've always been used to leading into 2022. At number 1 we have Batman from Dark Knights of Steel. In this new limited series that is being released as we speak, if you're watching this in 2022 when it was posted, Batman is being given a total medieval makeover. Along with other DC characters, Batman navigates a medieval landscape of dragons and ancient magic, donning not only a suit of armor but a sword as well, which really takes the concept of the Dark Knight to more of a literal degree than I think any of us were ever expecting. But honestly, it works for me. These days, Batman has become a character, and a franchise for that matter, that is being openly explored through various different lenses in the comics and in the movies. And people seem to be openly inviting more and more off-the-walls portrayals of the character, no matter how different they appear from the original. And in the Dark Knights of Steel, we're seeing yet another example of this, where Batman isn't even being set in the same time period anymore. But even though he may be somewhat unrecognizable from, let's say, the Tom King series, I feel like this has become something that fans of Batman have gotten used to over the years.
Number 10, Bishop. As some of you pointed out in the comments on the part 1 of this list, a lot of 90s characters, especially 90s X-Men, have completely different looks in the modern day when compared with their 90s appearances. Lucas Bishop is definitely one such character. Although he still has his M tattoo over his eye and a few details in his costume that pay homage to his original look, Bishop has definitely seen some changes, some of which might be so great that fans may not at first recognize him. While he still often is seen with his XSE guns and even still sports a red bandana, Bishop is now a member of the Marauders. Gone are the days of those 90s X-Men colors, and modern day Bishop dresses mainly in reds and blacks, in homage as well to his role as the Hellfire Trading Company's Red Bishop. Also, I love that Bishop is the Red Bishop because he's a bishop and his name's Bishop, it's crazy. Number 9, Crystal. Crystal's initial appearance had her recognizable mainly by her ginger or strawberry blonde hair and a simple white dress. I personally always thought of Crystal as being ginger, but then I see so many different versions of her where she has like maybe blonde hair. so I don't know. But I've always thought of her as a ginger. She is known for being the younger sister of Medusa, who is the Inhuman Queen and true love of Black Bolt. Crystal has had a few different looks, but generally she has longer ginger hair and is either in a yellow suit or a Fantastic Four suit when she was, you know, on that team. She has been known for dating Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, was once married to Quicksilver and had a daughter with him, and she was even for a time married to Ronan the Accuser. Yeah, it's been an interesting dating history, I feel like, for Crystal. All in all, Crystal has had a sort of wild life, and while her costume has changed gradually, comparing her short blonde-haired self in her yellow and black diamond suit to her first appearance with long ginger-like hair in her white dress, looks like a dress to me, and you might not know it's Crystal at first glance. And friends, if you want even more lists where we talk about all the glow-ups in comics and I guess some of the glow-downs, if that's a thing, be sure to let us know that you love this list by giving it a thumbs up. Number 8. Pyro. Pyro might be sporting a very similar suit when it comes to how he looked in his first appearance, but he also now has a skull tattoo. A full face skull tattoo. And honestly, I have come to love it. Not only that, but this version of Pyro was also originally known as a villain, and like many on the island nation of Krakoa, has been given a new lease on life where he no longer needs to be a villain. Instead, recently, Pyro has exclusively acted as a hero, fighting alongside his shipmates and teammates, the Marauders. During his time with the Marauders team, St. John Allardyce ended up taking refuge with his fellow teammates in a tattoo parlor. A few of them decided to get tats while they were there, Pyro included. He decided to get a full face tattoo, getting a black skull tattooed over top his face. And I gotta say, it's just been growing on me more and more every time I read Marauders. At first, after he got this tat, I was expecting, like so many other Krakoans, that Pyro would end up dying and then being resurrected, erasing the tattoo from his face. After all, who needs tattoo removal when you have resurrection protocols, and mutants dying and returning is no longer really a big deal at all. Although I'm sure the Healing Gardens could remove Pyro's tattoo almost as easily. Still, he hasn't gotten it removed or died and been brought back without it yet, so while you might wonder who that is with the skull face tattoo, it seems that it's becoming part of Pyro's modern day look quite seamlessly. So maybe in 10 years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, it's Pyro because the skull face tattoo. Maybe he'll still have it. Number 7. Flash Thompson, or as he's currently known, Agent Anti-Venom. Still, it's pretty wild to think that Flash Thompson, aka Eugene Thompson, started out as Peter Parker's bully back in the day. Flash has come a long way from being an antagonist to a friend of Peter's to a full-on war hero and later superhero. He's battled alcoholism, became an amputee, and even traveled into space where he fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you only knew Flash from his first appearance, or vice versa, you only knew him from modern day comics, you'd probably be shocked to see just how different the character is, how far he has come, and how much he has grown and evolved. He even became such a popular character among fans that he got to join the Resurrection Club, being returned to life recently after dying during the fight against Red Goblin. Number 6. Cable. In recent years, Cable has had a completely new look, considering that his old version died and was replaced with his younger version. Of course, his older version has since returned, but there was a good amount of time there in the comics when you might have been confused as to just who exactly you were reading about. Is Kid Cable meant to be Nathan's son, you might have thought, or is he some like de-aged version of Nathan Summers? Well, the latter is the correct assumption if you made it. Young Cable actually hunted his older self down, in essence completing his time loop. But of course, the old man still existed out there, and if you went to the right point and place in time, he would still be living earlier portions of his life. As such, we were able to bring Old Man Cable back in the comics, and young Cable actually realized that he would also have to leave and let the old man basically take over, as while he thought he knew it all, young and all, that's what young people usually think. They think they know it all. It turns out he still has lots to learn. Honestly though, I love both versions of Cable, and I wish that old Cable could team up with his younger self on more occasions. I want like a Kid Cable and Old Man Cable team up comic. Number 5. Speedball, or as he was known for a good amount of time in the comics, Penance. Robert Baldwin initially got his powers after a lab experiment went awry. After being exposed to extra-dimensional radiation, Robbie found that when he was the target of a certain amount of force, his body would transform. Instead of him being harmed from said blow, he would produce a protective barrier, causing him to become basically like a human bouncy ball. He could use this energy to then shield others, blast opponents, or to even halt speeding projectiles in midair. Speedball would later join the New Warriors. However, later on, he would be part of an incident at the center of the First Civil War, where 612 civilians were killed, including 60 children. This would prompt him to change in appearance and in mindset, becoming Penance, a spiky armored version of the character who had internal spikes in his suit to remind him of all the victims lost, as he felt personally responsible for their deaths. Speedball has since returned to his original appearance, but it has taken him time to recover both physically and mentally from his time as Penance. And he's kinda still on that road to recovery. He was Penance for a long time. Number 4. Angel. Angel is another mutant superhero who has gone through a ton of different looks in life. Most notably was his shift from having organic wings to techno-organic wings after he lost his organic wings when he became one of Apocalypse's horsemen. The crazy thing is that while Angel seems to appear as mostly his original version, there are times where you might be confused with him as to who is who, as he seems to kind of alternate right now in modern comics between his original form and his techno-organic form, Archangel. As far as I can tell, this hasn't been fully explained yet in the comics, though it has been acknowledged that this happens in a similar manner to his X-Corp partner, Monet. That is, when he gets more emotional or gets more angry, his techno-organic form seems to come out. This was alluded to at the end of issue 2 of X-Corp, their Hellfire Gala issue. And if there have been more explanations on this and I missed them, please feel free to tell me what issues I should in-depth read, because yeah, I feel like there's little details, but we haven't gotten like a full, here's how it is, let me break it down for you. Number 3. Nick Fury. While Nick Fury does look very different in modern day comics in comparison to classic comics, it is important to note that technically these are 2 different characters. Well, technically these are kind of like 3 different characters. Or 4 different characters. There's a lot of characters. The version of Nick Fury we saw in the MCU was actually inspired by the version of the character from the Ultimate Universe, who, fun fact, was also inspired in terms of appearances by Samuel L. Jackson, the very man who would end up playing him. In fact, a lot of the MCU characterization and even stories are inspired by the Ultimate Universe, the alternate reality of 1610, and the stories that went on there. The original Nick Fury of Earth 616 was actually a white man, but he would inevitably be replaced by a 1610 inspired alternate Fury after the original Nick Fury of 616 ended up kind of being transformed into a Watcher. The 1610 version of Fury and Samuel L. Jackson's take on the character would then be adapted for Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, and that's how we would get Nick Fury Jr., who is the son of the original Nick Fury from the comics and looks a lot like Jackson's 1610 inspired version from the MCU. See what I mean? There's lots of Nick Furies. People are like, Nick Fury changed, and I'm like, Nick Fury didn't change, there's just a lot of characters that came together. Number 2. Beast. Beast is one character that has gone through a massive amount of change since we first met Hank McCoy, the lovable vocabularian, scientist, and the X-Men's most bouncy team member, Beast. Back then, Hank was just a relatively large man with enormous feet and enormous hands, but his mutation continued to progress long after that first appearance, changing when he ended up forced to take a serum that he had created based around the hormone that causes mutation. As such, he mutated even farther, which became permanent after he didn't take the antidote quickly enough to thereafter revert the effects. This meant that Hank was now permanently even more muscular, agile, and now completely covered head to toe in gray fur. From there, his fur would become more blue, and over the years his appearance has become borderline lion-like or even kind of cat-like at times. Number 1. Star-Lord. Considering how much Peter Quill has changed with each era of comics, it could be hard for fans to recognize him in modern day. Once again, his appearance and power levels have changed so much. In his initial appearance compared to his modern look, he's basically unrecognizable. And if we go even farther back to the Peter Jason Quill of the 1970s, the Star-Lord of Earth 791 now, he is completely different. It should be noted though that shortly after the main continuity version was introduced, introduced in Thanos issue number 8, which came out in 2004, he was shortly after pretty radically changed when he appeared a few years later in Annihilation Conquest from 2007 to 2008, which is pretty much the version of Quill, roughly, that we have today. Although even then, he's still changed quite a bit. Quill more recently in the comics returned from Marinus, an extra-dimensional world where he lived unaging with his friends, partners, and his lovers, Mors and Aradia, for hundreds of years. He came back even more powerful than before he had left, and ended up joining forces once more with the Guardians of the Galaxy to defend the cosmos against the return of the Dark Olympians.
And at 10, Jim Gordon Batman. In the wake of Batman's apparent death against the Joker, plans for a new Batman were discussed, with Powers International laying the groundwork for a Batman-inspired task force. Their first candidate chosen to model this program was Jim Gordon, of course, who was initially hesitant to fill Batman's shoes but eventually agreed. Going through intense government training and getting surgical muscle implants, Gordon was given the first model of a new Batman robot armor, which he nicknamed Rookie, and took to the streets as the new Batman. By complete chance, he ends up finding Bruce Wayne and informs him that he's taken up the reins as Batman. As Gordon hears several different reports about Bruce Wayne being found dead throughout Gotham, he works with Batman to figure out that a Batman from an alternate dark universe, known as the Batman Who Laughs, is the one responsible. Tracking him down, Gordon seeks help from his estranged son, James Jr. However, another dark version of Batman arrives and introduces himself as the Grim Knight. But it's certainly jarring to see Batman go from like this big bulky hero to the lanky and, sorry to say, old Jim Gordon. He even looks fragile. And at 9, Wonder Girl. Yara Flor from the tribe of Amazons from the Amazon is the new Wonder Woman in Future State, who, in the absence of Princess Diana, came out of obscurity from the heart of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil to protect man's world from the magic that is within it. Yara Flor is a demigod who hails not from the island of Themyscira, but from the Amazon rainforest in South America. She has a faithful winged steed, Jerry, and along with her friend Kapora, a forest guardian spirit, Yara travels to the underworld to rescue one of her Themyscirian sisters from the clutches of Hades, the Olympian god of the dead. Yeah, a sister that she's never even met before. Yara is also an active member of the Justice League, although the new rules of the Justice League forbade fraternization amongst its members as a way to protect them individually and not have to go through the same tragedy that resulted in the dissolution of the previous League formation. Wonder Woman and Superman, John Kent, ended up becoming friends. It's also worth noting that despite always willing to work with her colleagues in the League, she's not happy to be a part of it. And at 8, Superboy. Now this seems like it's cheating since there are multiple people who use the Superboy mantle. However, the one that had the most makeovers has seemingly been Con-El, otherwise known as Connor Kent, with an E, because they're not cool like I am. If you read one version of Connor and then read a couple series later, you might not realize what's been going on. This man has gone through more looks than any teenager getting ready for a date in a Disney Channel movie. Not to mention the time where he merged with Spider-Man, after Spider-Man somehow defeated him. Superboy was created by Project Cadmus using Kryptonian DNA, intended as a replacement for Superman, who died fighting Doomsday. Artificially aged to his mid-teens and implanted with the equivalent of a high school education, Superboy was set free by the New Boys Legion before he could actually be implemented with safeguards to control him. One of the boys gave him a leather jacket before he set out to the city, where he had his first encounter with a villain when he found Sidearm attempting to steal money from an ATM. But since then, he's gone through like 2 other costumes and a load of different centuries, the most recent version coming from like the 30th century. So, yeah. And at 7, Hippolyta. Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazons and ruler of Themyscira. She is also the mother of Wonder Woman. In the Harley Quinn animated series, Queen Hippolyta first appears in the episode Bachelorette, after being enslaved by Eris, who takes control of Themyscira and turns it into a spa resort, planning to sell it to Lex Luthor. However, Harley Quinn discovers her plan and along with her friends takes down Eris and saves the queen and Themyscira. To thank them and celebrate their victory, she throws a rager. And in Something Borrowed, Something Green, the queen appears as a guest at Poison Ivy's failed wedding to Kite Man and the old Gotham corn factory alongside some of her subjects. But the queen of Themyscira being mind controlled, that seems fairly ridiculous, okay? Even if she was mind controlled by the goddess of discord, at that point, she might as well have just been able to tell us what games our friends were playing, okay? Harley Quinn, like they discovered her plan and took her down as a part of her bachelorette party for Poison Ivy. But if they could do that, how could Wonder Woman's mother not fight her off? Seems kinda lame. And at 6, Wally Wally West. Wally's lightning color has shifted based on various circumstances before. After escaping the Speed Force, his energy shifted from yellow to white due to his connection to the Speed Force growing stronger. And Wally's lightning later evolved to an indigo blue cosmic energy, and this was most notable when he united with the Mobius chair. Learning his children were inhabitants of a new dark multiverse Earth created by his own fears of losing them, an Earth that Tempest Fugonaut was now tasking him with destroying. Wally spent one last day with his kids, spending a nice dinner with them and giving them one last kiss before deciding to make his move, knowing what needed to be done. So he forced Tempest to promise him to get his kids to the Earth once he acted, leading Wally to sit on the Mobius chair and obtain its knowledge and power. The new godlike Wally just watched stuff and then just kind of destroyed everything. But he also realized that the chair was now infused with the power of Dr. Manhattan, and he could just do more than just sit and watch. Yeah, an omniscient Flash? That's pretty traumatic. Halfway through in at number 5, Green Arrow. Haha, you knew this was gonna happen. The Arrowverse crossover event Crisis on Infinite Earths had been in the process of setup for a while, with the previous Elseworlds crossover just being one big commercial for it basically, and the seasons leading up to it revolving mostly around what could happen in Crisis. One of these issues was the death of Oliver Queen, which shockingly was carried out in the first part of the crossover. After bringing Oliver back to life at the Lazarus Pit on Earth 19, John Diggle, his daughter from the future Mia, and Constantine all traveled to Purgatory to retrieve his soul. But when he was about to go back with them, Jim Corrigan arrives with a way for Oliver to save everyone. This turns Oliver into the Spectre, basically the most powerful being in the multiverse, giving him the powers of a god, allowing Oliver to reboot the universe with the help of the Paragons, and also stopping the Anti-Monitor from securing the destruction of all Earths. He also ended up corrupting the Speed Force by empowering Barry, which resulted in the Speed Force dying for a time, which is a whole other can of worms I won't discuss. But needless to say, you wouldn't recognize this version of Green Arrow, especially since he's dead and you can't really see him. In it 4, Black Lightning. In Dark Knights of Steel, Superman finds his way to a medieval Earth where familiar DC favorites are recast in the Middle Ages. Batman is a young prince and John Constantine is an oracle. But perhaps the most unique transformation is that of Black Lightning, who now is a king, pursuing a mysterious agenda against Superman and his family. The character has not been regularly seen in the comics for some time, but returns in Dark Knights of Steel, which has got to be my personal favorite Earth so far, because medieval, Cheese King, you get it. This time, Supes' parents actually made it to Earth along with him, and in the Kingdom of Storms, Kal-El's birth has triggered horrifying visions in a young John Constantine. As Constantine lays writhing on the ground, his mind is overwhelmed and he's dictating his visions to the royal scribe. The king arrives and readers see that it's Black Lightning. He's concerned over Constantine's visions and tells the scribe to write down everything the boy says. As Constantine comes out of his trance, he tells Black Lightning that the end is near. This is a pretty damn badass version of Black Lightning, similar to Black Panther in a way, since now Jefferson is rightfully a king. Respect. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Wonder Woman. The Dark Knight's death metal story wrapped up early 2021 with issue number 7, and in that issue and the issue before, we see Wonder Woman at her most powerful, in a godlike form that's even more powerful than a god. As the comic puts it, quote, "She has been a god before, but at this moment she's more. At this point she has ascended past godhood and can see all of time and all realities." Okay, she sees like every Earth's timeline, and she faces off against the Batman who laughs in his most powerful form as well. This fight is so intense that they hit each other through time itself. Diana here is charged with anti-crisis energy, a connective force that links all history and all lives as one story. Then she moves on to become one of the hands that created the multiverse going forward, with no walls and greater possibilities. She aids in creating the future state story we see in the next issues, and what was seemingly the centerpiece of DC 2021. So Wonder Woman becoming a god and remaking the universe, while very Oliver Queen as Spectre, still a pretty damn dramatic change. Penultimately in at number 2, Dreamer. Nia Nal, also known by her code name Dreamer, is a fictional superhero from the Arrowverse television series Supergirl, portrayed by Nicole Maines. The character is based on and is depicted as an ancestor of the DC Comics character Nora Nal, also known as Dream Girl. She debuts in the 4th season of the series, and Nia Nal is the first transgender superhero on television. In March 2021, it was announced that Nia Nal would feature and make her comic debut in a story written by Maines to be published in a Pride-themed comic book anthology on June 8th, 2021. Mostly you won't recognize her because she was a character really created by the show, even if she was intended to be a present version of Dream Girl. Nia Nal's powers include precognition and astral projection. On July 21st, 2018, trans activist and actress Nicole Maines was announced in the role at the show's San Diego Comic-Con panel. It was also confirmed that Nia would become the superhero Dreamer and that she is an ancestor of the Legion of Superheroes member Nora Nal. Maines described Dreamer as having this ferocious drive to protect people and to fight fight against discrimination and hatred. She's the superhero we need right now. The character is the first transgender superhero on television, and honestly, I think that it was worth it for this list. And finally, into number 1, Batman. Batman in Dark Knights of Steel, a new limited series from DC featuring your favorite heroes and villains as medieval knights, has made a load of changes to the character in this world. One of the biggest changes being to Batman. Bruce is the knight assigned to protect the king and queen of House L, as well as their son Cal, like how Link was assigned to protect Zelda in the story of Breath of the Wild. However, he seems to be more than just a mere man, able to withstand a banshee cry, in this case being Black Canary's cry. When it really should have killed him, he only bled from his ears. Even he was confused and worried that he had magic inside him, so he told Jor-El, who came to Earth along with his wife and son before Krypton exploded, that he should be banished for their sake. That's when, spoiler alert for the first issue, it's revealed that Bruce is really the result of an affair between Jor-El and Martha. So Batman is now part Kryptonian, while also basically being a Witcher. Oh wait, hold on, okay. He's ostracized because he's a bastard, and now he's secretly part Kryptonian? Yeah, Bruce Wayne is literally a Witcher, confirmed.
Number 10, Storm. Storm has had many different looks throughout the years, and depending on which era of Storm you are most familiar with, you might not recognize her right away when it comes to her appearances in modern day comics. When I think of Storm, one of the most iconic looks I think of is her very different 80s punk rocker look, where she's sporting a bright white mohawk. For me, this look is still one of the first ones that I think of even today. Even if you go back to her first appearance, she looks pretty different in comparison even to the 80s look. The cool thing about the modern day Storm look is that it seems to sort of incorporate all of these looks that have come before while also being quite unique. It's an homage to the past while not discounting the very real possibility of a grander future. That's actually what I like when it comes to a lot of the X-Men's updated looks. It's all about acknowledging the past while also using said past to fuel and motivate the future. Storm's initial appearance, her 80s look, and of course the now. Number 9, Venom. You wouldn't recognize Venom today compared to his 90s appearance either. For one, Venom initially appeared as a villain and therefore not only looked different but also acted quite differently. And now if we're talking about hosts that we associate with Venom, they're also pretty different in terms of their appearance. Currently, the Venom symbiote is teamed up with Eddie Brock's son, Dylan Brock. Oh yeah, if you've been out of comics for a while, Eddie Brock also has a son now. Dylan is actually Anne and Eddie's son, with a little mix-in of Venom as well, who was also there when he was conceived. And if we're talking about Venom in terms of Eddie Brock, you might not recognize him either. He's aged considerably as a result of him becoming the new King in Black following that King in Black event where Null was defeated and Eddie took his place. That was Venom and Eddie Brock then, and that is who Venom is attached to now, and what Eddie looks like now. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about all of the changes in comics, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Echo. Echo is Maya Lopez. When she first appeared, she was a villain who didn't even know that she was a villain in the story. She ended up fighting against Daredevil after being misled and made to believe that he was the one responsible for killing her father. She wasn't really a villain though, she was just like a misguided person. Echo's really, I think, always been a hero deep down. When we first see her, she wears bandages on her arms, possibly an allusion to her one-woman dance show, which is actually based on her life, which was all about how she felt like an Echo. Also, yes, there are many things that Echo is skilled at because her power is like Taskmaster's. She can acquire a physical skill simply by watching it, so she's not just an amazing fighter and martial artist, but she's also a great dancer too. Echo currently in the comics has shown up in the Avengers. She is now the new Phoenix in the comics, having won the opportunity and burden of being bonded with the Phoenix Force during the Phoenix tournament. In fact, Maya in the tournament didn't actually win, but instead was chosen because she had lost the most. The Phoenix Force was looking for a fallen champion apparently, not a big time winner. Echo as the Phoenix looks quite different than her initial appearance, no? I think it's like the Phoenix Flames for me. She still has those bandages though, and she's still got her face paint with her hand. Number 7, Iceman. When Iceman originally came on the scene, he had a very different look. If we go back to his first appearance in X-Men issue number 1, he was actually more like a snowman than an Iceman. Iceman in his early days wasn't quite as frozen solid and was more like an anthropomorphic but faceless snowman in battle. He didn't wear a trademark X-Men uniform, but he did put on his little black booties, which were kind of like, I guess, X-Men trademark uniform booties. piece because they're black and yellow, and there was a lot of black and yellow coloring with those original uniforms. This meant that Iceman was always the one who had to help Angel get dressed, as Warren had to deal with his wings, both unbinding them and then of course fitting them through his uniform holes, I imagine. We'd later learn in Marvel's Voices Pride from 2021 that Bobby was actually pretty happy to help, as he had a bit of a crush on Warren back in the day. Iceman since then has had a major glow up and appears to look like an ice prince in modern day comics. He even has cool spiky pauldrons. Spiky pauldrons. He's also had a glow up in terms of his powers too. Woo! Number 6. Hulkling. Hulkling is another hero who looks pretty different from his first appearance. He used to have a bunch of ear piercings, but I guess he can shapeshift, so it was easy for him to close them all up. I guess he was just like, I'm not into it now, and they're gone. Hulkling was much more gruff looking, I'd say, in his first appearance with the Young Avengers. However, he also had the name Hulkling. I mean, he still has that name, but I know that name has nothing to do really with the Hulk, but still, in his original appearance, he's big, he's green, and he's kind of like the Young Avengers' own version of that character, because, you know, everyone's kind of mirroring someone. Though to be fair, Teddy Altman is very much his own character and his own person, like many of the other Young Avengers. Currently in the comics, Hulkling isn't just a hero, but is also the Emperor of the Skrull/Kree Alliance. The Skree Alliance, if you like. And this new role has also dramatically changed his overall outfit and appearance. He looks super cute now, not that he didn't before, of course. He's just a different kind of cute now than he was before. Also, he has totally different hair. His hair now is blonde. It was black, but also shapeshifter, you know what I mean? Number 5. Dazzler. Alison Blair has had a ton of different looks over the years, and there have been countless points in her history when you may have not recognized her. If you've been invested in modern comics for some time, then Alison's current outfit is Dazzler, which she also sported in Way of X issue number 3, the morning after the Hellfire Gala, will likely be recognizable to you. However, if the last time you saw her was in, her own solo series back in the 80s, then you might be confused as to even who this character is. And if you saw her back in 2015 and were familiar with either the present or past appearances of Dazzler, or if you're familiar with that Dazzler, I really doubt that you would recognize her in the present day. There's many times when you'd be like, who is that, depending on which Dazzler you know. There has been a tendency to try and have Allison change with music trends, instead of keeping her in her somewhat, I guess, outdated disco roots. But personally, I think disco can still be a valid genre today. I still love disco, and I'd love to see her even return to that iconic silver jumpsuit. I like that Dazzler's had so many different looks, that's crazy. Number 4. Professor X. When we think of Professor X, usually a lot of us probably reflect back to his look in the 90s animated series. In fact, many X-Men fans who have seen Professor X recently would probably wonder just who they're even looking at. If you are more familiar with his appearance in the 90s, both in the animated series and in the comics, the modern Professor X might throw you for a loop. Currently, Professor X is able to walk again and happens to be sporting not a suit and, a blanket on his lap, but instead an all-black, skin-tight one piece. Also, he always wears Cerebro now, obscuring his recognizable face and his bald head. But yeah, that was Professor X then, and this is him now. Number 3. Nature Girl. Nature Girl is amazing. She's one of my favorite of the newer mutants to come out, and recently she has become a lot more metal, both in approach and in her appearance. Nature Girl can basically commune with nature, which often means she can encourage animals to help her, and they actually seem to feel within Nature Girl a kindred spirit. So there's a lot of empathy going on there between both sides. More recently in the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comics, we saw that Nature Girl has been in a constant state of depression and duress, feeling the pain that all nature is currently feeling due to humans polluting and just generally mucking up the planet and its natural and carefully balanced ecosystems. This forced Nature Girl to go on an adventure to fight for what she believes in, which resulted in her kind of accidentally killing someone and then losing all of her hair, just sporting her antlers as she turned to the dark side and took on oiling operations, aiming to destroy them and anyone who wouldn't renounce their loyalty to them. This is not your friendly neighborhood Nature Girl, that's for sure. Nature Girl then, Nature Girl now. I love her new dark look though. I love both versions of Nature Girl. I think Nature Girl's awesome. Number 2, Captain Britain, or more specifically, Betsy Braddock. Whether we're looking at things from the point of view as the hero mantle of Captain Britain, or looking at it from the character viewpoint of Betsy Braddock, either way, Betsy is looking pretty different now. For a good amount of time in the comics, Betsy was known for looking just like Quanon, because, well, she was kind of in Quanon's body, or they were kind of fused together at one point. Fortunately, she has now been restored to her own body, freeing Quanon and allowing Quanon to take up the Psylocke mantle. Betsy then went on to become the new Captain Britain in her brother Brian Braddock's place after he was ensorcelled by Morgan Le Fay, becoming her new Dark Knight. It was up to Betsy at that point to take Brian's amulet and become the new Captain Britain until Brian could be saved. Betsy has been shattered and managed to return and is still known as Captain Britain currently. Even though Brian also got free, but then Brian was like, you take it, I'm good, I'm gonna do other stuff. You don't have a lot going on right now, Betsy, so take a thing and then make it your own thing. I like it. Number 1, Captain Kate. Even Kitty Pryde's name has shifted somewhat. She's been known by a few different names in the comics: Shadowcat, Sprite, Kitty Pryde. Now, however, she prefers if you just call her Kate. Captain Kate is the Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company, and typically dresses in red as such. But not only that, she also typically dresses kind of piratey now. I personally love it. This is because Kate is now also the leader of the Marauders, who have reclaimed this one villainous name and are basically a pirate crew who sail the seas, bringing those mutants to Krakoa who want to be there, but who for one reason or another can't get there. They also help deliver and intercept shipments of goods as necessary. So the whole look really fits with what Kate is up to currently in the comics, but it is very different from her original or even her past looks. Kate before, Kate now. Although I will say that original outfit that she's wearing with like the red vest and like the stripy shirt, I was like, is there already like pirate vibes that were kind of carried over here? I don't know. Number 10, Spider-Woman. Jessica Drew has returned to her more classic look now in the comics, with a few upgrades though, but prior to that she was rocking an entirely new look in the beginning of the current Spider-Woman run. Love it or hate it, I personally loved it, her new inverted black, red, and yellow suit has been retired for now. But let's talk a little bit about the look and where it all came from, yeah? Spider-Woman ended up reaching out to get a new suit made when she decided to take on some bodyguard work to make some cash, and she thought to herself, hey, I can't wear like my regular suit, I'm gonna need a new suit for that. Because being a hero is great and all, but it doesn't really pay, and Jess does have bills to pay and baby Jerry to look after. Although she does have Roger's help, I think children are in most cases a job for 2 salaries in this economy, like minimum. Ronnie of Big Ronnie's Custom Battle Spandex made this new suit custom for Jessica, but under the instruction of someone who wanted to also monitor Jess's vitals. This comic is so good, I will not spoil that reveal for you if you want to go and read it. All I'll say is that you should give this new look and new comic a chance and check it out. And don't worry, Jess's classic look does return in issue 11. Number 9, Gilgamesh. I love Gilgamesh's new design actually. Gilgamesh is not an Eternal who has made a ton of appearances, but he is back in the newest series and sporting a new armored look in comparison to what we knew him to look like originally. This new design for the character kind of reminds me of Black Bolt if he were a luchador, but I mean that in the best way possible if that makes any sense. Gilgamesh here looks intensely intimidating in comparison to when we were first introduced to him. His armor was still cool then, made I believe by Sprite in issue 13 of the 1976 Eternal series, but in comparison to the modern day, it's kinda dated. Back then he rocked a full bodysuit with purple or hot pink lining depending on what color you see when you look at that, and here in the present day even the patterning for the lines of his suit is an improvement. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about more updated looks, roles, power sets, all of those cool things, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel has currently been going from cosmic to mystic in her own series as she seeks to defend herself against her one greatest weakness: magic. In order to do so, she returned to her friend and former one-night stand, Doctor Strange, for help, but when he and his colleagues all turned her away, Carol was forced to look elsewhere. Her new costume kind of alludes to this more magical time in her life and features a pretty cool cape, I gotta say. I do dig it. It definitely seems to take some inspiration from the whole Sorcerer Supreme look. Over the course of her current series, Carol has actually had more than a few new looks, including a Kree-inspired suit which she also sported during Empire, when she became a Kree accuser, and the red and black suit that Vox Supreme bonded to her, also making her hunt down the Avengers. Her newest magical-inspired suit is introduced in issue 28 of the current Captain Marvel run for those interested in checking it out. Number 7. Hippolyta. Hippolyta is now filling in for her daughter on the new Justice League team, leaving the ruling of Themyscira to Nubia, who has taken up her place as ruler. And with this shift, we also have gotten a completely new redesign for Hippolyta. To be honest, I almost didn't recognize her at first myself when I first saw this redesign. She's given up her regal clothes for a white and gold bodysuit, although admittedly she is still keeping a version of her crown while out on the battlefield with the current Justice League. Her tiara here comes in the shape of an eagle, which also makes it look similar to Wonder Woman's W shape, which I love. Hippolyta also wears a royal sash, which extends up to a sort of one-shouldered cape number. These pieces help to allude to Hippolyta's history and royalty while also updating her outfit to more fit in with her new role as one of Earth's greatest heroes. Of course, that is just, I assume, the look we are building to. When Hippolyta first shows up in the new Justice League run, she is sporting a much more regal looking costume, which is purple and gold, which I actually really love that costume. I know we're probably going to this white gold thing, but I really like this purple costume. Number 6. Aquaman. Aquaman's new look just kinda seems to be a nod to Jason Momoa's portrayal and the design for that character. Mainly, his newest costume features green pants, with a belt, with a symbol on it, and well, I guess tattoos. The other thing you might notice if you are reading the Justice League and checking out Aquaman in there lately is that he's kind of gone back to being a weaker character who's a bit of a joke. Overall, I'm not too sure how I feel about this one. I guess it all boils down with this redesign as to how much you are into Jason Momoa's version and whether or not you like your Aquaman to be more powerful or less powerful. Someone throw some water on that Aquaman. He's dying. Number 5. Leanne Harper. Leanne Harper has returned to us in the comics as one of Catwoman's group of street kids, if you can believe it. In DC Festival of Heroes, the Asian celebration out of 2021, Leanne makes a triumphant return to the comics. Here she sports dyed blue hair and calls herself Shoes. She doesn't remember her childhood or who her real parents are. She just remembers one evening where her mom, Cheshire, carried her to safety and her mom's mask. I don't think she even really knows who Cheshire is, it seems, at least in this story. I don't even know if she knows that that was her mom. It's all a little unclear. In the story Masks, this single memory and the mask that she saw in it inspires her to become a hero herself. Attempting to remake the mask from her dreams, she takes up the mantle Cheshire Cat. The last time we knew Leanne, she was just a child. She was believed to have died at a young age, but it seems that she somehow survived and now suffers from amnesia in regards to her childhood. It'll be really cool to see how that develops and where Leanne shows up in the comics. I'm excited for it. Number 4. Brew. I love Brew, and I am so happy he's gotten such a boost to his power levels. Brew is one of the alien mutants to have joined the X-Men. He was found by them as a young, abandoned brood. He was considered defective by his kind. Normally, these kinds of brood that are born into the world are killed, but because populations were so low at the time, he was spared. What was wrong with Brew in the brood's eyes? What makes him a mutant? He's capable of kindness and compassion. Brew's mutant power as a brood is basically friendship, which admittedly on paper sounds kinda lame, even though I personally love it. But after a run-in with the brood who were chasing down their king egg, Brew ended up becoming their new ruler and king when he ate said egg. Meaning that now, yes, he is in charge of all of the brood in the cosmos, which is pretty impressive. So you might recognize him in terms of his overall look, but you might not recognize him in his new role as king when you see him in the comics. But get ready to, because that's happening. That happened. It's great. To read about when this development took place, check out issue 9 of the 2019 X-Men run. And if you want to sort of see the beginning of that, you might want to also check out issue 8. 8 and 9, basically. Number 3. Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman has been through quite a journey in the comics that started back in 2020. She was one of the heroes to go up against both the Batman Who Laughs and his master Perpetua. His sort of master. And Wonder Woman got Perpetua's powers not only once but twice during the Dark Knight's death metal event. Although the first time around she failed in being able to confidently use them to save everyone, the second time around she made sure to intercept those powers before they could move into the Batman Who Laughs, who is currently in an alternate Batman Dr. Manhattan body and known as the Darkest Knight. The second time around, Wonder Woman managed to use these powers to defeat the villains and rebuild the universe. Winning the day for our hero heroes and giving us a glimpse into the future to come in Future State. Wonder Woman now has basically become one with the cosmos, and for her good deeds was granted a nice long cosmic nap by the hands. How nice. We could all use a long cosmic nap, could we not? I know I could. I could definitely use that. Take me to space and let me sleep along the stars. That'd be great. Number 2, Captain Kate. Call me Kate is the new tagline for Kitty Pryde as she reclaims the mutant team name Marauders and sets sail as their leader in the group book Marauders, which primarily centers around Kate, Emma Frost, and Storm. Seriously, I love this book. It is so good. Becoming a captain and the new Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company inspired Kate to take up an entirely new look, which means that you might not recognize her if you were just picking up a random issue of Marauders or gazing at one of its covers. Personally, this is a look that I think is worthy of all of the cosplays. Everyone must become Captain Kate now. Number 1, Roy Harper. You might not recognize Speedy if you see him anywhere recently in the comics, especially as the last time we saw him in the comics, he was killed by Wally West in Heroes in Crisis, so he was looking pretty dead. And he remained kinda dead even when Batman as a Black Lantern revived him and many others during the events of Dark Knight's death metal. Green Arrow's companion is now becoming more cosmic than ever as he becomes more associated with the Green Lantern's world, becoming himself a Black Lantern. How or why did this happen? Well, it's a bit of a mystery. Roy was being attacked by new villain Extract, who claimed that Roy didn't belong in this world. During this attack he was knocked out, and when Roy came to, he found himself with a Black Lantern ring in a Black Lantern uniform, learning that alternate energy construct versions of himself were the ones who had come to his rescue and saved him. And then he kind of also learned sort of why he was a Black Lantern, sort of. Has to do with Darkseid. You should check it out. It's a cool thing. It's a cool thing that's happening, and I'm interested to see where it goes. I think it's gonna lead us to Leanne too. Yes, father and daughter reunited.